Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bread of Life channel. Happy Memorial Day for those who are in the US and celebrating Memorial Day. This is the day that we remember those who were willingly gave their lives for other people's safety and security. And I just wanted to quickly honor one of those people. This is Kyle Carpenter. And in 2010, he laid on a grenade and saved his friend's life. The Bible says that no greater love has anyone than this, than a man would give his life for his friends. And so I think it's amazing. And there's been many other people who have laid on grenades or done other heroic acts to save other people's lives. And so Kyle Carpenter is one of those. And he endured 40 surgeries. They thought he was dead. Actually, when he arrived for treatment, he thought he was dead. After the grenade hit him, he told his friends, he thought he was dying, and he sustained very serious injuries, had 40 surgeries, and anyway, just a great hero. So let me say hello to Roya. Hi, sister. Hi, LB. Jamie Russell, Peter. Glad you guys are here. Travis and Stephanie, if you're still here. So let me explain what I'm going to be doing today. Well, first, we're going to do the Atheist of the Month. And I just want to tell you guys, I have such a hard time every month picking the Atheist of the Month. And that's because I want everybody who supports my channel to feel appreciated. And so there's a lot of people who have been very faithful to my channel. And so it's really hard to choose one every month, but I mostly choose it based on who has been at the streams and for like the longest amount of time and participated and that kind of thing. And so, but it is hard to choose. So please, if you're one of those people that has been faithful, please know I appreciate you, and I can only choose one. So, but I do want to give an honorable mention to someone who I really closely considered for Atheist of the Month, because he gave me so many laughs this month, including making a video about me. So I just want to mention him, and that is B.S. Lewis. And for those who are not familiar with B.S. Lewis, he is just a really funny guy. He used to be a Christian. He has a channel, and I'm going to put the video that he made, like kind of a silly response video to me, with regard to Titan Uranus, the last Atheist of the Month. So here's the link to that video. And please go subscribe to B.S. Lewis, because he's just so funny. And he's just getting started. So he needs the subscribers. So now I will announce the Atheist of the Month, and I wish he was here, but I don't see him. But the Atheist of the Month for the month of June is Hillary's emails. So you have just, let me read what I wrote. For your steadfast attendance in the live streams and great contributions to discussions, thanks for supporting the Bread of Life channel. And Hillary's emails, I don't know your name. If you want your like real name on here, I'm happy to put it, but I know you as Hillary's emails. So thanks again. And please send me your email address so that I can send you your award. Okay, with that, let me talk about what I'm doing with Bible reading. So 2 years ago, I started doing a weekly Bible reading with the goal of reading through the entire Bible on live stream. And the way that I'm doing it is going back and forth, one book of the Old Testament, one book of the New Testament. So I was doing this for a year, and I got through Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus, and I got through Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So now it is time to do the next Old Testament book, the book of Numbers. But basically I stopped for a whole year because really my channel started turning into like more of an atheist audience. So I kind of abandoned the Bible reading, but I feel like it's time to get back to it now. So let's yeah, if you go back, if you look at my first videos, those were like the first Bible videos. They're still all on there, guys. So, but they're kind of embarrassing for me because these were like the first live streams I ever did. And so you can see I'm like so nervous when I started Genesis. And then I just kind of loosened up over time and I got used to it. But but anyway, the purpose of these Bible readings, this is not going to be an in-depth look at history, archaeology, culture, any of that. There's other channels where you can get that. If you want to, information on the ancient Near East, go watch Digital Hammurabi. Or, if you want in-depth on commentaries and really like parsing out all the meanings of the Hebrew words and all of these things, go to Sentinel Apologetics. He does a lot of really in-depth stuff. But my purpose in doing the Bible readings is for devotion, to really. So what we're going to be looking at is what can we learn about God from what we're reading. So I'm not going to be able to answer all of your questions if, about like the history and, very in-depth questions. So, those are things that you can Google. So this is really just us reading together and trying to learn what we can about God. So let me give you a brief summary of what we read up until this point. If you're unfamiliar with the Bible, the book of Genesis is the creation, and you have a lot of big events in there. And then you get to Exodus, where the people of Israel are in slavery and God delivers them out of slavery. And he establishes a covenant with them, a deal. And they were supposed to keep God's commands. And if they kept his commands, God would bless them. If they didn't keep his commands, in many cases, he would kill them, or they would, fall out of favor with God. And so in the second half of Exodus and in the book of Leviticus, God is really establishing, he's giving them the commands, and he's establishing also, he tells them how to build a tabernacle in the desert, a big tent in the desert. And that would be the place where God would dwell. That would be, and then they would camp around the tabernacle. And there were sacrifices that were offered, animal sacrifices that were brought. And so the book of Leviticus is a lot of the animal sacrifices. Now we're coming to the book of Numbers, and let's just get real. I'm going to be very real. There is a lot of boring stuff in Numbers. Okay. The book of Numbers will bore you with numbers. And there's not just numbers, but there's a lot of other, boring stuff in the Bible. The second half of Exodus, you can get totally bored with the descriptions of the tabernacle. Like they're talking about curtain colors and designs and all this stuff for so long. And then in Leviticus, it's like explanation after explanation of the practices for animal sacrifice. And so, that gets pretty boring in Leviticus. Well, Numbers gets boring with the numbers. There's going to be long stretches of the book of Numbers where they're just like listing off numbers of Israelites and numbers of the gifts they bring and things like that. But interspersed with that are things that we can learn about God and stories of events that happened during that time. So it is also a very interesting book, but there will be some parts that you might want to watch on double speed if you're not watching this live. Okay. So as we get started, I have two things that if you're live with us right now, you can pay attention to, and I will ask you how many times it says this at the end. So in the 5 chapters that I hope to read today, try to notice how many times it says that the Israelites did just as the Lord commanded Moses. And then also try to take note of how many times it says that if people approach the sanctuary, or they approach something when they're not supposed to, that they will die or that they will have to be put to death. Okay, so we'll see who can figure out how many times each one of these things are said. Okay, and by the way, thank you guys for being here, Jerome and Orge, and all of you who also attended, who also watched Digital Gnosis, because I did not realize he was going to be streaming this morning, and I would not have streamed if I had known he was going to be streaming, because I know a lot of you also watch his channel. So Uncle Jesus Real Bible Reading says that he has made a video of the blood sprinkling in Leviticus a few months ago. Cool. Okay. Well, I guess I don't have you or anyone else has a mod, so I can't tell you to put the link in the chat, but you can put it in the comment section later and people can check that out. Okay. So B.S. Lewis says he's going to go rub it in Gur's face real quick. Okay. Well, anyway, so let's get started. And I'm just going to read. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to read a chapter and then I'm going to stop and I'm going to look at the comments and see if you guys have questions or comments that I should put up. And then at the end of the chapters that I read, I will let anyone join the stream and talk about it. So if you have thoughts that you want to share, questions, concerns, complaints, or things that you learned about the Lord, then prepare to share those. You can come on the stream, and you stream joiners do have to show their faces before joining the stream. Okay, so let's get started with Numbers chapter 1. And I'm reading out of the New International Version. For me, this is the most readable English version. It's quite easy to understand, but it also sticks fairly close to the Greek and Hebrew. So I prefer this version, but it's not perfect. And there are some places it takes liberty that it probably shouldn't. So if you're reading out of a different translation and yours says something, slightly different, then we can look at the difference between those and then look into that further. Here we go. Numbers chapter 1. The Lord spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting in the desert of Sinai on the first day of the second month of the second year after the Israelites came out of Egypt. He said, "Take a census of the whole Israelite community by their clans and families, listing every man by name, one by one. You and Aaron are to count according to their divisions all the men in Israel who are 20 years old or more and able to serve in the army. One man from each tribe, each of them the head of his family, is to help you. These are the names of the men who assist you. From Reuben, Elazur, son of Shadur. From Simeon, Shelumiel." Oh boy, you'll just have to excuse my pronunciation. I'm just going to butcher this. "Son of Zurishaddai." From Judah, Nahshon, son of Aminadab. From Issachar, Nathaniel, son of Zuar. From Zebulun, Eliab, son of Helon. From the sons of Joseph. From Ephraim, Elishama, son of Amminahud. From Manasseh, Gamaliel, son of Pedahzur. From Benjamin, Abidan, son of Gideoni. Now let me see how many people are still watching. Oh, wow. 13 still here. Wow. Okay. I'm proud of you guys. Thanks for sticking through the names. From Dan, Ezier, son of Ammishaddai. From Asher, Pagiel, son of Okran. From Gad, Eliasaph, son of Duel. From Naphtali, Ahira, son of Enan. These were the men appointed from the community, the leaders of their ancestral tribes. They were the heads of the clans of Israel. Moses and Aaron took these men whose names had been specified, and they called the whole community together on the first day of the second month. The people registered their ancestry by their clans and families, and the men 20 years old or more were listed by name one by one as the Lord commanded Moses. And so he counted them in the desert of Sinai From the descendants of Reuben, firstborn son of Israel, all the men 20 years or old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name, one by one, according to the records of their clans and families. The number of the tribe of Reuben was 46,500. From the descendants of Simeon, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were counted and listed by name, one by one, according to the records of their clans and families. The number was from the tribe of Simeon was 59,300. From the descendants of Gad, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Gad. Sorry, guys. I'm still have a cough remnant from COVID, but the number from the tribe of Gad was 45,650. From the descendants of Judah, all men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Judah was 74,600. Okay, looks like we lost 3 of you now. All right. Well, I totally understand. Like I said, these numbers will totally bore you. From the descendants of Issachar, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Issachar was 54,400. From the descendants of Zebulun, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Zebulun was 57,400. From the sons of Joseph, from the descendants of Ephraim, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Ephraim was 40,500. From the descendants of Manasseh, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Manasseh was 32,400. From the descendants of Benjamin, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Benjamin was 35,400. From the descendants of Dan, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Dan was 62,700. From the descendants of Asher, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Asher was 41,500. From the descendants of Naphtali, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Naphtali was 53,400. These were the men counted by Moses and Aaron and the 12 leaders of Israel, each one representing his family. All the Israelites 20 years old or more who were able to serve in Israel's army were counted according to their families. The total number was 603,550. The ancestral tribe of the Levites, however, was not counted along with the others. The Lord had said to Moses, "You must not count the tribe of Levi or include them in the census with the other Israelites. Instead, appoint the Levites to be in charge of the tabernacle of the covenant law, over all its furnishings and everything belonging to it. They are to carry the tabernacle and all its furnishings. They are to take care of it and encamp around it. Whenever the tabernacle is to move, the Levites are to take it down. Whenever the tabernacle is to be set up, the Levites shall do it. Anyone else who approaches it is to be put to death. The Israelites are to set up their tents by divisions, each of them in their own camp under their standard. Levites, however, are to set up their tents around the tabernacle of the covenant law, so that my wrath will not fall on the Israelite community. The Levites are to be responsible for the care of the tabernacle of the covenant law. The Israelites did all this just as the Lord commanded Moses." Okay, that's chapter 1. Let's see who's still with me. Okay. Jerome, thank you. I know you're such a Digital Gnosis fan. And you're here, so I'm happy about that. So Jerome says, not only does Yahweh like real estate, he also likes forging armies. Who knew? That is something that we learn about him here, isn't it? That he wanted the fighting men counted. So Uncle Jesus, Real Bible Reading, says, if you leave your bunker, you get put to death. Yep. LB says 4 more to go. Okay, thank you for surviving. All right, Taffy's here. Taffy is one of my old school Christian fans. So thank you, Taffy. Now, Peter says, for the word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of soul and spirit, joints and marrow, and discerning the thoughts and intents of the heart. Mitish Patel says, looks like you're reading for the first time, the Bible for the first time, Rebecca. Really? What makes you feel that way? Because maybe my pronunciation. I'm usually not reading it out loud. Okay, here we go. Chapter 2. We're moving right along. Okay, we're only 20 minutes in, so I think it only took us a few minutes to read that chapter. Okay, the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron, the Israelites are to camp around the tent of meeting some distance from it, each of them under their standard and holding the banners of their family. And by the way, are you guys paying attention to how many times it says, and they did just as the people did, just as the Lord commanded through Moses? And are you paying attention to how many times it says that anyone who approaches the sanctuary or does something like that will be put to death if they weren't supposed to? So let's keep going. On the east, toward the sunrise, the divisions of the camp of Judah are to encamp under their standard. The leader of the people of Judah is Nahshon, son of Amminadab. His division numbers 74,600. The tribe of Issachar will camp next to them. The leader of the people of Issachar is Nathaniel, son of Zuar. His division numbers 54,400. The tribe of Zebulun will be next. The leader of the people of Zebulun is Eliab, son of Helon. His division numbers 57,400. All the men assigned to the camp of Judah, according to their divisions, numbers 186,400. They will set out first. On the south will be the divisions of the camp of Reuben under their standard. The leader of the people of Reuben is Elizur, son of Shadur. His division numbers 46,500. The tribe of Simeon will camp next to them. The leader of the people of Simeon is Shelumiel, son of Zurishaddai. His division numbers 59,300. The tribe of Gad will be next. The leader of the people of Gad is Eliasaph, son of Duel. His division numbers 45,650. All the men assigned to the camp of Reuben, according to their divisions, number 151,450. They will set out second. The tent of meeting and the camp of the Levites will set out in the middle of the camps. They will set out in the same order they encamp, each in their own place under their own standard. On the west will be the divisions of the camp of Ephraim under their standard. The leader of the people of Ephraim is Elishama, son of Amminahud. His division numbers 40,500. The tribe of Manasseh will be next to them. The leader of the people of Manasseh is Gamaliel, son of Pedazur. His division numbers 32,200. The tribe of Benjamin will be next. The leader of the people of Benjamin is Abidan, son of Gideonite. His division numbers 35,400. All the men assigned to the camp of Ephraim, according to their divisions, number 108,100. They will set out third. On the north will be the divisions of the camp of Dan under their standard. The leader of the people of Dan is Ahiezer, son of Ammishaddai. His division number 62,700. The tribe of Asher will camp next to them. The leader of the people of Asher is Pagiel, son of Okran. His division numbers 41,500. The tribe of Naphtali will be next. The leader of the people of Naphtali is Ahira, son of Enan. His division numbers 53,400. All the men assigned to the camp of Dan number 157,600. They will set out last under their standards. These are the Israelites counted according to their families. All the men in the camps by their divisions number 603,550. The Levites, however, were not counted along with the other Israelites as the Lord commanded Moses. So the Israelites did everything the Lord commanded Moses, and that is the way they encamped under their standards, and that is the way they set out, each of them with their clan and family. Okay, we got 3. We got 13 still. Okay. Zhang says you'd almost think that God, who inspired the Bible, didn't know anything about the Japanese, the Peruvians, or the Indonesians. Well, of course, God knew about those people groups. We're focused on God's history with the people of Israel simply because of God's choice to use Abraham, the original man of faith, use Abraham to bring the Savior of the world. So that is why God is focused in on Israel, and we have the history of the people of Israel. And of course, there were people groups all over the world that God was interacting with that we don't have their recorded history because they weren't the ones that God was using to bring the Savior of the world. So Jerome says these chapters seem rather short. Well, I think I'm reading fast. Okay, so this is chapter 3. This is the account of the family of Aaron and Moses at the time the Lord spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai. The names of the sons of Aaron were Nadab, the firstborn, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. Those were the names of Aaron's sons, the anointed priests who were ordained to serve as priests. Nadab and Abihu, however, died before the Lord when they made an offering with unauthorized fire before him in the desert of Sinai. They had no sons, so Eleazar and Ithamar served as priests during the lifetime of their father Aaron. The Lord said to Moses, "Bring the tribe of Levi and present them to Aaron the priest to assist them. They are to perform duties for him and for the whole community at the tent of meeting by doing the work of the tabernacle. They are to take care of all the furnishings of the tent of meeting, fulfilling the obligations of the Israelites by doing the work of the tabernacle. Give the Levites to Aaron and his sons. They are the Israelites who are to be given wholly to him. Appoint Aaron and his son to serve as priests. Anyone else who approaches the sanctuary is to be put to death." The Lord also said to Moses, "I have taken the Levites from among the Israelites in place of the first male offspring of every Israelite woman. The Levites, are mine. For all the firstborn are mine. When I struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, I set apart for myself every firstborn in Israel, whether human or animal. They are to be mine. I am the Lord." The Lord said to Moses in the desert of Sinai, "Count the Levites by their families and clans. Count every male a month old or more." So Moses counted them as he was commanded by the word of the Lord. These were the names of the sons of Levi: Gershon, Kohath, Merari. These were the names of the Gershonite clans: Libni and Shimei. The Kohathite clans: Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. The Merarite clans: Mali and Mushi. These were the Levite clans according to their families. To Gershon belonged the clans of the Libnites and Shimeites. These were the Gershonite clans. The number of all the males a month old or more who were counted was 7,500. The Gershonite clans were to camp on the west behind the tabernacle. The leader of the families of the Gershonites was Eliasaph, son of Lael. And the tent of meeting, the Gershonites were responsible for the care of the tabernacle and tent, its coverings, the curtain at the entrance to the tent of meeting, the curtains of the courtyard, the curtain at the entrance to the courtyard surrounding the tabernacle and altar, and the ropes, and everything related to their use. To Kohath belonged the clans of the Amramites, Izharites, Hebronites, Uzzielites. These were the Kohathite clans. The number of all the males a month old or more was 8,600. The Kohathites were responsible for the care of the sanctuary. The Kohathite clans were to camp on the south side of the tabernacle. The leader of the families of the Kohathite clans was Elizaphan, son of Uzziel. They were responsible for the care of the ark, the table, the lampstand, the altars, the articles of the sanctuary used in ministering, the curtain, and everything related to their use. The chief leader of the Levites was Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest. He was appointed over those who were responsible for the care of the sanctuary. To Merari belonged the clans of the Mahlites and Mushites, and these were the Merarite clans. The number of all the males a month old or more who were counted was 6,200. The leader of the families of the Merarite clans was Zuriel, son of Abihail. They were to camp on the north side of the tabernacle. The Merarites were appointed to take care of the frames of the tabernacle, its crossbars, posts, bases, all its equipment, and everything related to their use, as well as the posts of the surrounding courtyard with their bases, tents, and ropes, tent pegs and ropes. Moses and Aaron and his sons were to camp to the east of the tabernacle toward the sunrise in front of the tent of meeting. They were responsible for the care of the sanctuary on behalf of the Israelites. Anyone else who approached the sanctuary was to be put to death. The total number of the Levites counted at the Lord's command by Moses and Aaron, according to their clans, including every male a month old or more, was 22,000. The Lord said to Moses, count all the firstborn Israelite males who are a month old or more, and make a list of their names. Take the Levites for me in place of all the firstborn of the Israelites, and the livestock of the Levites in place of all the firstborn of the livestock of the Israelites. I am the Lord. So Moses counted all the firstborn of the Israelites as the Lord commanded him. The total number of firstborn males a month old or more listed by name was 22,273. The Lord also said to Moses, take the Levites in place of all the firstborn of Israel, and the livestock of the Levites in place of their livestock. The Levites are to be mine. I am the Lord. To redeem the 273 firstborn Israelites who exceed the number of the Levites, collect 5 shekels for each one, according to the sanctuary shekel, which weighs 20 gerahs. Give the money for the redemption of the additional Israelites to Aaron and his sons. So Moses collected the redemption money from those who exceeded the number redeemed by the Levites. From the firstborn of the Israelites, he collected silver weighing 1,365 shekels, according to the sanctuary shekel. Moses gave the redemption money to Aaron and his sons as he was commanded by the word of the Lord. All right, that is chapter 3, guys. We are moving right along. Okay, so Lena says, so God condones murder for trespassing. Yes, I think that is a great observation. The Lord, if he tells you not to go near his sanctuary and you go near it, he has no qualms about killing you. You will die. So that is something we definitely learn from this. Jerome says, but why is it bad though? It's bad to approach for a morally sufficient reason. Lena says, anyone here also following the Friendly Atheist Bible study video series on Numbers? I'm not, but I have listened to 1 or 2 of his Bible studies. He's not that friendly. Janet says, hey son, did you get your foundation treated? I don't know what that's about. Lena says, Numbers is hands down the worst book in the Bible. I will be interested to see as we go along, Lena, about why you think it's the worst book. And you're welcome to jump on and tell me why after we get done with our reading. So let's see. I'm not sure. I might have. Okay. Peter says chapter 4 is when the plot really thickens. So let's get on to chapter 4. Okay, so Lena says that's really messed up. Your fictional deity is a monster, and you're a monster for worshiping it. Lena, you know what? You should be very glad that I worship the Lord, because let me tell you, if you think I'm crazy now, if I didn't believe in God, I wouldn't think murder's wrong. I wouldn't think stealing is wrong. I wouldn't think that there would be any type of morality whatsoever. So be glad that I at least have God to keep me in line right now. Okay. So yes, Lena says it's so boring. Name after name. I agree. This part is really boring, and I'm really proud of you guys who are hanging in there. Thank you so much. So, well, Lena says that is crazy. No doubt about it. Well, let me think about this. If I accept the worldview that most of you guys accept, then if I think we came about by natural processes through evolution, then I would think the best thing for humanity is if the strong survive and if we kill off all of the weak. So I would have no problem killing the weak if they got if I thought, it would be, and I would think that that would be better for humanity. And I would have no problem, just living out that principle of the strong should survive in whatever way. So that's why I wouldn't think stealing is wrong. I wouldn't think lying is wrong. So that's the way I would think if I believed in evolution and that we came about by natural processes. I would also think that I don't see how there could be anything that could be called wrong if we evolved by natural processes. Then we're just a product of chance. We are just a cosmic accident. And so I don't really see how a cosmic accident can say that one thing is wrong and another thing is not wrong. And for those of you who, have been on here when we're talking about realism, moral realism and moral anti-realism, some of you agree that it's simply morals are just, there's no such thing as stance independent morals. So I'm telling you what I would think is true if we evolved by natural processes. And I would have no reason to think that we should avoid killing or any of the things that might be considered wrong by the Bible's standards. So let's see. Let's see. Wildheart says lying, stealing, and killing is wrong because humans have empathy and we are a social species. Well, that's just describing the way that we are. That doesn't tell me why it would be wrong. Anyway, we're kind of getting on. We might get off track here. Dave says, that's not survival of the fittest, Rebecca. And you show again that you should take a biology class. I don't know how a biology class is going to tell me what is right and wrong, Dave. So Peter W. says, even us old people, yes, if we evolved by natural processes and we're just like, basically, it's good for the strong to survive, why should we care for old people? That seems silly. That's a waste of resources, right? Social species need each other to survive. Well, that might be your opinion, but I don't need to accept that. Okay, okay. Oh, wow, we're really getting off here. B.S. Lewis says Christians still murder, so I don't see what good an objective moral standard does anyway. Well, there are, of course, Christians who end up doing things that are wrong, like murdering people. But we're taught against that. I mean, we're not supposed to do that. So that's people acting against God's command. Blessed be he says, hi, Rebecca. I'm glad I found your channel. Thank you. Okay. Melody Joy says, how does she not see she is more moral than the God of the Bible? Well, if the God of the Bible is the true God, I don't see how I could possibly be more moral than him. So he is the creator and all this stuff is his. So, if he wants to kill people, he has every right to do so. And so I don't see how I could be more moral than the one who created everything. But there are some people who would agree with you, Melody Joy. In fact, probably a lot of people who are watching this would agree. And, if you watched recently, I had some Satanists on my channel and, the Satanist Black Mamba was like, hey, you haven't heard the other side of the story. What if God is the bad guy and Satan's the good guy? And you should really listen to his side of the story. And so, but the way that I think about it is, if God is really the bad guy, then we are all absolutely screwed anyway. I'm getting on board with the creator of the universe, because I wouldn't see, even if he was a terrible moral monster, the best hope you have is to be on his side. Otherwise, rebellion against him is absolutely futile. Now, I don't think he's a moral monster. I think he is an amazing God. He's loving, he's good. And so I think that there's some misinformation about him. But yeah, it is true. He will kill you if, especially if you're in a covenant with him, and he's shown you many miracles, and then he tells you to do something and you don't do it. Like he tells you not to come near a sanctuary and you come near. Well, I mean, why'd you go near a sanctuary? So anyway, let's get back to it. So I'm loving these comments, by the way, guys. Thank you for being here. Okay, here we go. Chapter 4. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, take a census of the Kohathite branch of the Levites by their clans and families. Count all the men from 30 to 50 years of age who come to serve in the work at the tent of meeting. This is the work of the Kohathites at the tent of meeting, the care of the most holy things. When the camp is to move, Aaron and his sons are to go in and take down the shielding curtain and put it over the Ark of the Covenant law. They are to cover the curtain with a durable leather, spread a cloth of solid blue over that, and put the poles in place. Over the table of the presence, they are to spread a blue cloth and put on it the plates, dishes, and bowls, and the jars for drink offerings. The bread that is continually there is to remain on it. They are to spread a scarlet cloth over them, cover it with the durable leather, and put the poles in place. They are to take the blue cloth and cover the lampstand that is for light, together with its lamps, its wicks, trimmers, and trays, and all its jars for the olive oil used to supply it. Then they are to wrap it and all its accessories in a covering of the durable leather and put it on a carrying frame. Over the gold altar, they are to spread a blue cloth and cover that with durable leather and put the poles in place. They are to take all the articles used for ministering in the sanctuary, wrap them in a blue cloth, and cover that with the durable leather and put them on a carrying frame. They are to remove the ashes from the bronze altar and spread a purple cloth over it. Then they are to place on it all the utensils used for ministering at the altar, including the fire pans, meat forks, shovels, and sprinkling bowls. Over it, they are to spread a covering of the durable leather and put the poles in place. After Aaron and his sons have finished the covering of the holy furnishings and all the holy articles, and when the camp is ready to move, only then are the Kohathites to come and do the carrying, but they must not touch the holy things or they will die. The Kohathites are to carry those things that are in the tent of meeting. Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, is to have charge of the oil for the light, the fragrant incense, the regular grain offering, and the anointing oil. He is to be in charge of the entire tabernacle and everything in it, including its holy furnishings and articles. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, see that the Kohathite tribal clans are not destroyed from among the Levites, so that they may live and not die when they come near the most holy things. Do this for them. Aaron and his sons are to go into the sanctuary and assign to each man his work and what he is to carry. But the Kohathites must not go in to look at the holy things, even for a moment, or they will die. The Lord said to Moses, take a census also of the Gershonites by their families and clans. Count all the men from 30 to 50 years of age who come to serve in the work of the tent at the tent of meeting. This is the service of the Gershonite clans in their carrying and their other work. They are to carry the curtains of the tabernacle, that is the tent of meeting, its coverings and its outer covering of durable leather, the curtains for the entrance to the tent of meeting, the curtains of the courtyard surrounding the tabernacle and altar, the curtain for the entrance to the courtyard, the ropes, and all the equipment used in the service of the tent. The Gershonites are to do all that needs to be done with these things. All their service, whether carrying or doing other work, is to be done under the direction of Aaron and his sons. You shall assign them as their responsibility all they are to carry. This is the service of the Gershonite clans at the tent of meeting. Their duties are to be under the direction of Ithamar, son of Aaron, the priest. Count the Merarites by their clans and families. Count all the men from 30 to 50 years of age who come to serve in the work at the tent of meeting. As part of all their service at the tent, they are to carry the frames of the tabernacle, its crossbars, posts, and bases, as well as the posts of the surrounding courtyard with their bases, tents, tent pegs, ropes, and all the equipment and everything related to their use. Assign to each man the specific things he is to carry. This is the service of the Merarite clans as they work at the tent of meeting under the direction of Ithamar, son of Aaron the priest. Moses, Aaron, and the leaders of the community counted the Kohathites by their clans and families, all the men from 30 to 50 years of age who came to serve in the work at the tent of meeting, counted by the clans, were 2,750. This was the total of all those in the Kohathite clans who served at the tent of meeting. Moses and Aaron counted them according to the Lord's command through Moses. The Gershonites were counted by their clans and families. All the men from 30 to 50 years of age who came to serve in the work at the tent of meeting, counted by their clans and families, were 2,630. This was a total of those in the Gershonite clans who served at the tent of meeting. Moses and Aaron counted them according to the Lord's command. The Merarites were counted by their clans and families. All the men from 30 to 50 years of age who came to serve in the work of the tent of meeting, counted by their clans, were 3,200. This was the total of the Merarite clans. Moses and Aaron counted them according to the Lord's command through Moses. So Moses, Aaron, and the leaders of Israel counted all the Levites by their clans and families, all the men from 30 to 50 years of age who came to do the work of serving and carrying the tent of meeting, numbered 8,580. At the Lord's command through Moses, each was assigned his work and told what to carry. Thus they were counted as the Lord commanded Moses. Okay, awesome. Let's see what you guys have to say about this. Peter W. says, my son-in-law told me he believes in Jesus for the first time ever this morning. I never thought I would hear such a thing. Woo! I'm so happy to hear that, Peter. That's amazing. Lord bless him and help him grow in the knowledge of the truth. So what did God have to hide in the sanctuary? What were those healthy, perfect looking priests up to in there? Well, they were, doing the sacrifices and the things that the Lord had for them to do. So let's see. Melody Joy says, yikes, you're telling us your God burns you with a straight face. Oh, wait, burns you? I can't read that. Yeah. Okay. Burns you with a straight face. Where does it say he burns us? Anyway, he kills you. He will kill you if you go near his sanctuary, obviously, if you're an ancient Israelite and you're not supposed to go near his sanctuary. Now, keep in mind that the people that we're talking about, the Israelites, what had God just done for them? They saw so many miraculous things that he did. He led them miraculously out of Egypt. They actually saw the Red Sea part. They walked through with a wall of water on both sides. God was going with them as a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire. God was miraculously providing food for them. They saw, and heard God's voice from Mount Sinai, and saw, clouds and lightning and everything. Like they experienced the presence of the Lord. And so if you've been through all of that, you've seen the Lord's miracles, and then he tells you, like, don't come near his sanctuary, you think you might be able to just carry that out, so the command that God is giving, while seems to be strict, it's really not a hard command to follow, right? Like, just don't go near the sanctuary and you'll be fine. And this is the way that I think about it. Janet says, his thoughts and ways are higher than ours. We did not create all things. He did. No one will mock God when they see him face to face in his grand majesty in comparison to our filth. Amen, Janet. totally agree. I might have to go too far back. I'm not quite sure. So Melody Joy says, we aren't screwed because he isn't there. Well, that is certainly a perspective of many people who are watching this. So thank you for sharing your perspective. And Melody, I am glad you're here. You know, there's not too many women that chime in on these things, especially atheist women. So thank you for watching and sharing your thoughts. Okay, B.S. Lewis is talking to Jerome, so I'm not going to worry about that. Most people have forgotten the way of Christ. Sad but true. I hope that's not true. So, Dapper Dino, good to see you. No flimsy leather for good, only durable. Yeah, only durable leather. Yes. Wild Heart says it's basically a cosmic dictatorship run by Yahweh Sung Un. Okay. Well, you know, I wouldn't call it exactly a dictatorship, but God is the king. He is the ruler. But his desire is not to rule over you harshly. His desire is actually that we would rule and reign with him. And he gave humanity governance of his creation. He made us the governors of his creation. So it's not that God was always trying to rule over us, ruthlessly and control everything that we're doing. He only gave them one rule in the beginning, guys. I mean, he's not that harsh. So, okay, I think even if there might be some. Okay, B.S. Lewis, maybe he's responding to what I just said. Rule over who? Well, it says rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and all of his creation, the creation itself. So that is what he gave us to rule. Jamie Russell says, we have such a high priest who sat down at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven and who serves in the sanctuary, the true tabernacle set up by the Lord, not by a mere human being. Yes, and that's what we need to. Thank you for bringing this up, Jamie, because actually everything that we're seeing in the Old Testament, in this situation with the Israelites and the setting up of this earthly sanctuary, in Hebrews, it tells us that this was a copy of the heavenly things, the heavenly sanctuary, God's dwelling place, and that Jesus is our high priest. So, Jerome says, Rebecca, why aren't women counted in these lists? Well, that's a great question, Jerome. And it's simply because women were not sent out to fight. This was the census was taken for the military, for the fight, to know how many fighting men there would be. And then the Levites, yes, it was, male men that were chosen to be the priests. And I think we could understand why, if you think about women bearing children and like the difficulty that would be of trying to do the work of the priests while you're bearing children and needing to nurse them and care for them and everything. So I don't see this as sexism. This is just the way of life that they had. So now let's go to chapter 5, and this will be the last chapter, and then I will let anybody come on and share your thoughts about these chapters, guys. Like, if you want to share something unrelated to these chapters, let's do it another time. If it's something that has that pertains to these chapters, great, please come on. Okay, chapter 5. The Lord said to Moses, and by the way, this chapter, I'm glad that I wanted to try to fit this in today, because I've heard people bring this chapter up quite often with objections to it. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this. Bye, LB. Thank you for coming. Appreciate you. Okay. The Lord said to Moses, command the Israelites to send away from the camp anyone who has a defiling skin disease or a discharge of any kind, or who is ceremonially unclean because of a dead body. Send away male and female alike. Send them outside the camp so they will not defile their camp. I will dwell where I will dwell among them. The Israelites did so. They sent them outside the camp. They did just as the Lord had instructed Moses. The Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, any man or woman who wrongs another in any way and so is unfaithful to the Lord is guilty and must confess the sin they have committed. They must make full restitution for the wrong they have done, add a fifth of the value to it, and give it to the person they have wronged. But if that person has no close relative to whom restitution can be made for the wrong, the restitution belongs to the Lord, and it must be given to the priest, along with the ram, which atonement is made for the wrongdoer. All the sacred contributions the Israelites bring to a priest will belong to him. Sacred things will belong to their owners, but what they give to the priest will belong to the priest. Then the Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and say to them, if a man's wife goes astray and is unfaithful to him so that another man has sexual relations with her, and this is hidden from her husband, and her impurity is undetected, since there is no witness against her and she has not been caught in the act, and if feelings of jealousy come over her husband and he suspects his wife and she is impure, or if he is jealous, or if he is jealous and suspects her, even though she is not impure, then he is to take his wife to the priest. He must also take an offering of a tenth of an ephah of barley flour on her behalf. He must not pour olive oil on it or put incense on it, because it is a grain offering for jealousy, a reminder offering to draw attention to wrongdoing. The priest shall bring her and have her stand before the Lord. Then he shall take some holy water in a clay jar and put some dust from the tabernacle floor into the water. After the priest has had the woman stand before the Lord, he shall loosen her hair and place in her hands the reminder offering, the grain offering for jealousy, while he himself holds the bitter water that brings a curse. Then the priest shall put the woman under oath and say to her, if no other man has had sexual relations with you, and you have not gone astray and become impure while married to your husband, may this bitter water that brings a curse not harm you. But if you have gone astray while married to your husband, and you have made yourself impure by having sexual relations with a man other than your husband, here the priest is to put the woman under this curse. May the Lord cause you to become a curse among your people when he makes your womb miscarry and your abdomen swell. May this water that brings a curse enter your body so that your abdomen swells or your womb miscarries. Then the woman is to say, Amen, so be it. The priest is to write these curses on a scroll and then wash them off into the bitter water. He shall make the woman drink the bitter water that brings a curse, and this water that brings a curse and causes bitter suffering will enter her. The priest is to take from her hands the grain offering for jealousy, wave it before the Lord, and bring it to the altar. The priest is then to take a handful of the grain offering as a memorial offering and burn it on the altar. After that, he is to have the woman drink the water. If she has made herself impure and been unfaithful to her husband, this will be the result. When she is made to drink the water that brings a curse and causes bitter suffering, it will enter her. Her abdomen will swell and her womb will miscarry, and she will become a curse. If, however, the woman has not made herself impure, but is clean, she will be cleared of guilt and will be able to have children. This, then, is the law of jealousy. When a woman goes astray and makes herself impure while married to her husband, or when feelings of jealousy come over a man because he suspects his wife, the priest is to have her stand before the Lord and is to apply this entire law to her. The husband will be innocent of any wrongdoing, but the woman will bear the consequences of her sin. Okay. Well, let me look at the comments on this. And let's see. Wow, there's a lot of wild heart question marks. So, Let's see. Okay. Is there where God is pro social distancing? Let's see. The priest gets paid. Wonder who wrote that book. Let's see. Okay, there's a lot of short comments. I am so trying to follow this, guys, but there's a lot of comments here. Okay, blessed be he says, Rebecca, are you reading from the King James Bible? No, I'm reading from the New International Version. It's much more understandable for most people. Jerome says, can the woman just say, I don't want to go to the temple with you? I suppose she could, but I would hate to see what the repercussions of that would be. And in a male-dominated society where, women probably were not like, didn't have that much, say so. But okay, let's see. I am going to let you guys in and we will talk about this. Okay. All righty. And let me pin that. Oh my gosh, guys, you're typing so fast. Hold on. If you're trying to get in right now, just be patient because I have to try to pin my comments so people can get in. Okay, there we go. All righty. So the comment, I mean, the link is there if you guys want to come in. What link is this? This is for if anybody wants to come in and discuss these chapters, bring your comments, your concerns, your complaints. Women were treated as property, and Yahweh says that's the way to be. And who wrote the Bible? Men or women? Yeah, it is true that in some ways, I mean, the women, I would say they were more treated as property than in our modern Western society, right? So, I mean, that's just the reality of it. But I don't think that is God's ideal. Oh, did I put the wrong link? Oh, darn! I'm sorry, guys. Oops. Okay, let me no. Okay, give me 1 minute. I'm reposting. There we go. Okay. All right. Now you got the link to come in. So, not if us Christians get their way. I wonder what you're responding to there. Jerome says, I have so many comments about that one chapter. It's way funnier than I thought. Maybe the last chapter. A lot of people have complained about this because they're like, see, God sponsors abortion. You guys shouldn't be pro-life. But let's look at what's happening here. This is actually a protection for women. So, a man can't just be like, I think you cheated on me. Let's see. Hi, Greg.
Oh, hi.
How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Hey,
Good.
just a quick comment. If you never thought about this, Mara, this is what you're talking about here with the bitter waters. That's a reflection of the bitter waters of Mara that the people of Moses made the people drink there. And then you have these bitter waters that you just read in Numbers, and that's a play on the word Mary is a play on this principle. So you have Mary who passed, it was a virginity test. She was a virgin. She passed the bitter water test. That's why she was the Virgin Mary. So that's just a little casual thought there. I thought I'd give you to think about.
Wow, interesting. I've never thought about that, but that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that.
All right. Yeah, I'll let somebody else on. I just wanted to share that with you.
Okay, cool. Bye. Good to see you. Hi, Wildheart.
Hiya, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad.
So, what's going on? What do you want to share about what we read?
I was going to ask, is it okay? Do you think that was an abortion, what the priest did? Does that equate to an abortion?
No, I mean, look, this is, as I was trying to explain, this is a protection for women. That way, your husband couldn't just say, I think you cheated on me, and then like mistreat her, send her away, or continue to suspect her, right? And like, but so this actually protected her so that she could actually get, a clear answer from God about her innocence. And then since this bitter water, if she had committed adultery, then the result, of course, would be that the baby would die. But this was a way of showing her innocence so that she wouldn't have that problem. But let's just suppose that there was an abortion there, like this did cause a baby to die, right? Well, the woman would also die because the penalty for adultery was the death penalty.
So the baby would have died anyway.
Yeah.
If she'd been guilty, they would have killed the woman, so the baby would have died anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So B.S. Lewis says, is there a dude version of the drink that makes his testes shrivel up? No, there isn't. And this does reveal something about the ancient culture of the ancient Near East, which it's not fair, it's not ideal, but typically men have ruled over women throughout most of recorded history. I mean, there are exceptions to that. There's been some cultures where women were more dominant, but in the ancient Near East that wasn't the case. And so there was no test for men. And I don't think that's like God preferring men or anything like that. But I feel like this story, this provision here in the law does show that God was concerned about women and their protection, and that they would have an opportunity to prove their innocence. So let's see. Did you have anything else? Any other comments you wanted to make?
No, I'll drop off. It was only that. Thanks for letting me on. Cheers.
Okay, sure. Yep. Have a good day. Okay. Anybody else want to jump on? Zhang says it's almost like Rebecca steps into reality sometimes, but then she just reverts back to type. What does that mean? Oh, James says I missed the stream. Well, you can go watch it again, James, if you're into it, but I would recommend watching it on double speed because Numbers is a bit boring in some parts, and I would say this was one of the more, the larger portion of it was just reading like numbers from the clans and that kind of thing. So Dave says, where's the commandment from Yahweh to men not to be sexist? I can't read that. I think he means, bad word. There isn't one. Yahweh is no better by coinkydink, an invention of men. Well, Dave, I disagree with that. I mean, the penalty for men committing adultery and that kind of thing is also it's death. So God isn't just like being easy on the men. Jerome says Numbers 1-4 is garbage content. So okay. Well, guys, this has been fun. Uncle Jesus Real Bible Reading says women rule the world now since 1987. Well, would the world be better off if women were in control? I tend to think it would be less violent, but that's just my thought. So, okay, guys. Well, I don't have anything else to say. Actually, I thought about telling you guys about some experiences that happened to me. I actually shared part of this on Nidamos's channel last night, but it's something the Lord is in the process of doing. And so maybe I'll just share something that God is doing in my life. And actually, if you guys remember, maybe last month when I think it was on the stream I did with David Neff, Jerome, you were there. But somebody asked me, do you have an example of when you thought God told you something and then it didn't happen? Okay. Now, I almost gave this example of it in this story that I'm about to tell you. I almost gave this example, but I stopped myself because I thought, wait a minute, it hasn't been enough time yet. I cannot say that God didn't do what I expected him to do until like maybe 6 months later passes. Okay. So God did something pretty astonishing recently. So I want to share this with you guys. So if you flash back, and this is like, go back 2 years, I was living in Dubai with my family, and we were getting ready to move to Utah in the US. And so I was going to be responsible for finding where we were going to live in Utah. So I was like, Lord, please show me like where we should go. I want to be directed by you. Like I don't want to choose the wrong place. I mean, I felt like it was important for our kids, like especially for our younger son, because this is where he would like go to high school. And I just felt like it was like a really important decision. And in the past, the Lord had like given me direction in certain ways and I had missed it. And so, and okay, maybe this is just sharing too much, but like in our previous experience of moving, when we moved from Turkey to Dubai, I prayed that the Lord would show me where the kids should go to school. And I felt like I didn't listen to the Lord because my mind got too focused on anyway, it's just a long story, but I felt like I missed God on that. And then I felt like I suffered like my kids didn't like get what they could have done if I had really been listening close to the Lord. But anyway, so when we were getting ready to move here to Utah, I was like, Lord, I really want to hear from you. I just want to go where you're directing. And so God gave me 2 dreams. One of the dreams, I saw an apartment complex. And the apartment complex, the main feature of it was that it had a gigantic facility. Oh my gosh, Pine Creek's coming on right now. I'm not going to get to finish telling my story. Hi.
Hi, finish your story. I'm listening.
Really?
Yeah, I was listening.
Okay, cool.
Finish your story.
Awesome. Welcome. So, okay, let's see. Let me go back to this view. So anyway, I had this dream about the apartment complex. The main feature of the apartment complex was that it was like a huge facility with like all kinds of like stuff for people to do. And one of the main parts that I saw was that it had an indoor basketball court and it had a seating area outside of the basketball court where you could watch people play basketball. Now, that was really cool in the apartments, but the feature that I didn't like of the apartments was that all the apartments were made of glass. And I was like, how can anyone have any privacy here? And like in my dream, so I woke up from the dream and I was like, God, are you showing me where to go or where to avoid? Because I really didn't like what I saw in that apartment. Like I was like, the feature of like not having the privacy was really disturbing to me. So I didn't know if I should go there or avoid that place. But in my dream, we were in that apartment for 1 year. Okay. Then I had another dream. And in this dream, our house, and it was a house, was right next to the kids' school. And it was on a mountain. And I liked that dream. And so when I came to Utah, I was looking for that place. I was driving around. I was looking for the place on the mountain. This is what I wanted, the house next to the mountain. But I didn't find that anywhere. And so then I started looking, and actually it was like there were like hardly any houses for sale in Utah. I don't know if anybody knows anything about real estate in Utah right now, but it's incredibly hard to buy a house. Any house that comes open is like people are bidding.
That's because the Mormons reproduce so much.
And people don't leave Utah. They come here and then they don't leave. So, and there's a lot of people moving in here from tech companies and stuff. So anyway, it was very hard to even find a house. So I went to look for an apartment. Well, the first apartment that I came to was the one that I saw in my dream, including it had the indoor basketball court with the feature of seeing. So I was like, oh my goodness, this is my dream. And then I was like, well, Lord, were you telling me to go here? And even though I felt like there was an aspect of the dream I didn't like with the lack of privacy, I did feel like that was where God wanted us to go. So I signed the lease. And sure enough, the aspect that I didn't like in the dream, that has really come true. I mean, of course, the apartments aren't completely made of glass, but the privacy thing is an issue. I mean, we can hear our neighbors when they watch a movie, when they flush the toilet, when they do anything. So like that aspect of it was real. And I felt like God prepared us for that. Well, when we first moved in this apartment, that 1 year thing in the apartment haunted us because we did like this apartment. And it's such a pain to move. We were like, we want to stay here for like the whole time that we're in Utah. We want to stay here. And my husband was like, I was like, but my dream, it was only 1 year. And my husband was like, I'm just telling you right now, I am not moving out of this apartment on the basis of that dream. Like if God wants us to move out, he's gonna have to like give us something else. Like he'll have to give us something else. Well, anyway, that other dream had never left my mind. And a few months after we got here, we noticed that there was a housing complex being built right next to the school. And I was like, wow, that's kind of like my dream. It's like right next to the school. So we went and we looked at the model homes and I was like, wow, this is a lot like my dream, but except it's not really on a mountain. And my husband was like, what are you talking about? Not on a mountain. The school is called Mountain Ridge. The housing complex is called Mountain Ridge. This is your mountain. And I was like, oh my gosh, it is. So then we were like trying to buy one of these houses, right? And we started like in December looking to try to get one of these houses as they would come open, as they would get them built, they would offer them and people would bid on them. Well, we tried for 3 months to get one of these houses, but people were outbidding us. And in that 3 months, the price of the houses went up $100,000. And so it came to the point where we had to re-sign our lease on our apartment. We had to choose because we had to give them 60 days notice. And we were like, well, I guess it's not what we thought, I mean, maybe God is going to do something in the future, maybe. But to me, it felt when we went ahead and re-signed our lease. But when we did that, it felt to me like, dang, I really thought God spoke to us. Like it felt like a failure of what the Lord had said. So that's why when you guys asked me recently, has anything ever happened? Like, have you ever felt like God spoke to you and then it didn't come true and then you realized it wasn't? I was about to give you this example because it seemed like it was creeping closer to the 1 year mark, but it hasn't. We just now got to the 1 year mark. 1 week before it hit the 1 year mark, we got a call and we had totally given up. We got a call from our real estate agent and there came a house available in this place. And we were like, oh my gosh, like we want to do it, but it doesn't look like it's going to work out with our financing, right? It looks like it's now the interest rates have gone up. The Price went up $100,000. We're like, we can't afford this now. We actually can't afford it. So we told the real estate agent, no. I told the real estate, the real estate agent, the lender, everybody was like pressuring us. I was like, no, we can't do it. We just can't afford it. Well, then I had a meeting, and I'm sorry, my story is getting a little long. Sorry, Pine Creek. Look, but just let me tell. So then I had a meeting of my Christian YouTubers fellowship, and they were all talking about, and I had said no, and we were all talking about what the Lord is doing. And like the theme of the night, people were talking about how like the Lord, it doesn't matter what the finances are. Like if God is telling you to do it, then he will provide. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like we're saying no to this because we can't afford it. But like if it's really God, then he'll provide. And so I was like, okay. Let me just write back to my real estate agent right now. And I was like, okay, we'll think about it. Anyway, so long story short, we changed our minds. We decided to do it. But my husband was like really worried about it. He was like, I have like a peace deep inside that might be the Lord's will, but I'm really scared about the money. And so last Sunday, he was like, okay, he was just like, God, I'm really scared about this. If this really is from you, will you please give me $10,000? And then that was last Sunday. He went to work on Monday, and he had an email with a request for him to do a special job assignment. And the minimum extra he will get paid is $10,000. And so anyway, here we are. I wanted to share that as just an example of how the Lord speaks. And, honestly, I'm still scared, even with the $10,000. And some of you are like, see, this is why you crazy people, your religion makes you do crazy stuff that you shouldn't do because that's just dangerous. Well, guys, this is what a walk of faith is. And like, I'm just saying, like, if this really is God speaking, and I have a lot of indications that it is, then, yeah, it's risky, but guess what? Every day in life is a risk. I mean, every time you get into your car, it's a risk. So there's no non-risky part of life. So, anyway, that's just my story. So what's your
So all this took place when? Like in the last few months?
Yeah, well, we started trying to like that was in December when we realized they were building the housing complex next to the school, and when we started looking for a house there. But we bid for 3 months, then we gave up in March because we had to choose whether to re-sign our lease, and it didn't look like we were going to be able to get one of the houses because people were just bidding and bidding and bidding. So we failed for 3 months to get it, so we gave up. But that just happened last week. Like this all happened last week. Like we're in the process of like closing on the house now. And yeah, the $10,000 thing happened last Sunday was when he prayed. And then Monday is when he got the assignment.
Yeah, we bought our house that we're living in now on March. We put in an offer on March 2020. You know what happened in March 2020?
Pandemic.
That's when the just started. Yep. And I told the loan officer, I'm totally expecting to lose $100,000 on this house, like within the first couple of years, like in depreciation value. I said, but I'm going to do it anyhow. And the exact opposite happened. Like it's gone up 200,000 since I bought it. Wow. That's what happens when the Federal Reserve pumps trillions of dollars in the economy.
Right.
But yeah, I listen to stories like that, and I'm not persuaded.
Yeah, I don't expect you to be.
Yeah. Why don't you expect me? If you why wouldn't you expect me?
Well, I mean, because you're starting with the idea that God doesn't exist and that he doesn't interact with people.
But you know what would change my mind? Like having dreams and having certain things fit that dream, I can explain away pretty easily, and I think you would agree with that. But like having my water soaked napkin light on fire, now we're talking. Right?
I was talking about this last night on Nidimos's channel. Nidimos said, why won't God just light his napkin on fire?
Yes, why won't he?
Well, I'll tell you what I told Nidimos, and I think you would agree with this, right? If Christianity is true, then what you are doing right now is very evil, because you're turning people, you are actively trying to turn people away from God. So
How am I doing that?
now,
With the water soaked napkin, I'm doing that?
no, I'm saying with your channel.
Oh, okay. But
So you're basically setting yourself up as an enemy of God, right? And then you're asking God to do something, a carnival trick for you, basically.
no.
And
I my channel would change, I'm sure, if my water soaked napkin did legitimately light on fire in front of my own eyes. You think I'd keep doing my channel the way I'm doing? I'm telling you the truth.
yeah.
My whole channel would change. Now, I might not be your version of Christian, but my naturalistic thinking would be totally blown out of the water.
Yeah.
No
Well,
pun intended.
yeah. Well, I think the problem is that what your starting point is wrong, because
I know, I'm asking for a sign, so my starting point changes.
I know, and that's the problem. Remember what Jesus said to the people who asked him for a sign. He said, "A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign, and no sign will be given to them except for the sign of Jonah." So no sign will be given to you, Pine Creek. You're starting
Well, then I'm
with
screwed.
the wrong. You are, unless you repent of your sins. You must repent.
But Rebecca, you know that someone can't repent of their sins if they don't believe in this God and sin to begin with. It's meaningless.
And that's a problem.
Right. And what would change that is
yourself.
this water soap napkin or a miracle like that.
It won't, because
How do you know that?
In reality, those people that were asking Jesus for a sign, guess what? If they had just paid attention to Jesus, they would have seen plenty of signs. Jesus was going around miraculously healing people,
Yes.
walking on water,
That's what I'm asking
multiplying
for.
bread. There were plenty of signs.
Right.
So
That's what I'm asking for.
why demand a sign? So no, you can look around you and there are plenty of signs. God is not going to do your sign on demand. There are many miracles that are happening every day in the world.
I'm not asking
There's
on
many
demand.
documented miracles, and even the sign of Christ being raised from the dead. There is your sign, God incarnate. And so, I mean, you have...
But that sign's not good enough, because anybody can write stuff that might be true and might be false. I need more. Like, you agree, like when Jesus said, if it's true that he said this, that when you see the Father, you see me, I and my Father are one, that he had to demonstrate that. Otherwise, people wouldn't believe him. They think he's crazy. And how did he demonstrate it? He told the winds to calm down. He walked on water. He multiplied the loaves and fishes. I'm just asking to see those things like the first century Christians saw. Is that so bad?
No.
Okay.
If you're starting from the right place of humility, which I don't think you are, you act as if God needs to prove himself to you.
So are you saying that unless you're starting from the right place of humility, God will not do a sign for you?
I'm saying you'll be he may choose to do that. I can't say as specifically in every case, because there's clearly, we could probably come up with examples of people who were treating God horribly, and then God still intervened and did something to show them the truth. So it's possible. It's possible, but
if it's possible, I'll wait for it.
Okay.
I'm not demanding, like, if your God exists, then he can take all the time in the world he wants. As long as he does it before, I die, that'd be nice.
Well, now see, you've told, when I asked you about your story, you were quite vague. Hi, Jason.
Jason Bourne.
Hey, what's up?
Don't get him upset. He'll take you out.
Come on. I love you both.
Thank you. But you were quite vague about why you left the faith. And, it is strange to me, because if you have or had the Holy Spirit, and as from your own testimony, you were a committed Christian, like fully believing in this stuff for many years, then it does surprise me that the type of arguments that are available online or whatever you reasoned out in your head, it surprises me that you lost your faith.
It surprises you that someone who truly has the Holy Spirit in them would leave?
For the reasons that you say you left. And for
what
the
are the reasons
complaints
I
that
say I
hear.
left? What do you remember?
Well, that's
me
why I
saying?
said you were vague. You were quite vague. You said, this is what you said to me. You said, I listened to other people's perspectives. And then
No, I started, yeah, that's part of it.
Mhm.
You know, I could say the same thing about Christians who come into the faith and say the reasons are vague, or they give this long laundry list of experiences and steps in their walk to becoming closer to God and becoming a true Christian, whatever that means. And they can't really pinpoint one specific thing. Oh, this is where the light turned on, and this is where I gave my life to Christ because of this one thing. It's the same thing with people leaving the faith. You can't just say it's this one thing. It's a culmination, the cumulative case of reasons to doubt that it's true to begin with. So if you're looking for one specific thing, I can't give it to you. It took like 5 years, just like it takes 5 years for some people to become a Christian. Right?
yeah.
That's reasonable, isn't it?
Reasonable in some sense, but I mean, I still feel like I haven't heard a good reason for you to betray Jesus.
You're never ever you're never ever in your life, Rebecca, going to hear a good reason from an atheist, because in your mind, this is true. And so any
Yes.
reason against it is not a good reason by definition. So you'll never, ever understand it. You'll hear the words I'll say, but it's not going to compute because you're so entrenched that this is true. Like I could say divine hiddenness. Well, that's a horrible reason. I could say the problem evil. Well, I got that solved. Or I could list a whole laundry list of things. I could bring up biblical contradictions. Oh, that can be harmonized. I could ask what's more likely, that people made up stories or that a man actually walked on water. Well, now you're just having these presuppositions against miracles, Doug. You will always have something to say against it. So this is why guys like me will come on channels like this and just ask very simple questions like, with your dreams that you had, have you had dreams that God has nothing to do with? If so, how do you tell the difference between those and the ones you think God had? And even if your dream comes true, can you have a dream that ends up a year later coming to fruition and God still had nothing to do with it? If the answer is yes, how did you distinguish that from what happened to you just this past month? Like those questions are difficult questions for Christians to answer.
Yeah, well, sometimes it is difficult to distinguish if God is involved or God is not, but there are certain qualities, I would say, that go with the dreams, certain imagery, certain feelings. And then, there are others that I think are demonic dreams. There are times when I feel like I'm having a dream that is not from God at all. And then there's some dreams that I think are just, subconscious and they don't have a meaning. And sometimes it's not always easy.
And I would posit that you have no good way of telling the difference between those different dreams. Even if God's real and does interact with his creation through dreams, you have no reliable method of telling the difference.
Well, I mean, one way is to find out if they come true. So
No, I just, like you just agreed with me that a dream can come true and God can have nothing to do with it.
That is true. Yep.
So
I have to.
So you have no way of gauging, oh, this dream's from God, this dream isn't. Even if it goes with God's word. Let's say you have a dream that's completely in line with the scriptures. God still might have nothing to do with that dream. That couldn't be because of your understanding of the scriptures. And so it's in your brain. And so then you dream about it. Oh, what do you know? I dreamt and it's right in line with the scriptures. Your interpretation of the scriptures.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's why this is a walk of faith. It isn't always, a walk of, it's not a walk of, I've got everything reasoned out perfectly. I have all the answers,
but you just admitted that faith is not reliable because you don't know. I mean, there's no reliable way of knowing.
Well, that's why it is faith, and it's not like, you seeing everything and having all the answers to everything. But I mean, it depends. How do you want to live? And I think that I'm living the best way that I know how, and that is by faith. And I think God loves that. So like, that's how I've chosen to live. I'm not saying you have to live that way, and you've chosen not to live that way. So
Yeah. And have I lost anything?
well, I mean,
According to you, no.
I think you have, but
Well, you would say I've lost a relationship with the creator of the universe, but it seems like I'm not missing it.
yeah. Well, if you're not missing it, then I mean, enjoy your life. I mean, that's what the creator has given you the ability to do, to enjoy what he has given you, and with the ability to ignore him. So, I wouldn't begrudge you what the creator has given you. And let's let Jason jump in and say something.
Let's talk about the housing market.
Yeah, I mean, I've just kind of been listening, but this topic goes to, I think, what we've talked about before, about whether you have good reasons to believe what you believe. And I know you're talking about like faith, which I would agree with Pine Creek, with Doug, that, if you just want to say, look, you have faith in these things, you certainly can do that, but that's not doesn't necessarily mean that you have good reason to believe what you believe. And as Doug was saying about, like, if you have a dream and, the dream comes true, that's not necessarily good evidence to suggest that God exists. But I think from your perspective, you think you do have good reasons. And so I think this is where where we have a disconnect, which is what's a good, like, when somebody says, look, I have good reasons to believe in God, like, are those actually good reasons? And how do we evaluate whether those reasons are good? I feel like Doug sometimes is like, he's probing to see, like, is this actually a good reason? And let's compare it to other things. And ultimately, I wouldn't say post hoc rationalization is an effective way of knowing whether something is correct or not. You can always you can put the pieces together to say, this makes sense. But are those actually good reasons? So anyways, I mean, I guess that's the core question is, do you think you have reasons that can be well explained to suggest that God exists? Or are you just saying, I just have faith that God exists and there aren't really any good reasons, but I know that God exists?
No, I think it's silly to even question God's existence. I think everyone should believe God exists. So I don't think you have a reason not to believe that God exists. So
you think you have good reasons?
Absolutely.
And like, what are those good reasons?
Well, you're not going to like it. You're not going to like it. Well, you think about by natural processes. You're fully convinced of that, which is why you're not going to. I don't think that this universe and human beings and all the other things that we experience could ever possibly come about by natural processes. So I have
you said differently the other day when I talked to you about that thought experiment on the screenplay. You said, what did I say? Didn't you say that one can at least imagine a world without a God?
Imagine? That's imagination. That's a story.
Can you conceive? Can you conceive of a universe existing without a God?
Sure.
Can then compare that to what you just said. But
that doesn't mean it's possible in reality.
Is it possible in reality for a universe to exist without God?
I don't think so. You asked me to create a fictional story. I can create all kinds of fiction.
Okay, so you're coming from the point of view that it's impossible for our universe to exist without some sort of deity.
Absolutely.
Okay, so at that point, like if I were going to talk to you for hours and hours about God, at this point, then I would just say, okay, let's just talk about what this God's like then. Like, would I have good reason to doubt that this God that you're imagining or that you think created the universe walked on water 2,000 years ago?
Well, I mean, if he created the universe, I don't know why he would have a problem walking on water. But I will say this. I don't think that you can come to believe in the God of the Bible simply by looking at the natural world.
Okay.
Well, I mean, not that you can't. You could, but it wouldn't naturally follow. So, you could imagine some other deity.
Okay,
that
so
created.
describe the God that you imagine or that you think has to be there. What's the minimum requirements for our universe because we exist? It doesn't have to be like this God has to walk on water, right? What's the bare minimum of this God?
Well, now you're gonna get me. Look, I'm gonna get into all kinds of philosophical traps if I do this.
Right, because you can't say omniscience, right? Because you're leaning open theist, and I'm not even sure you'd say omnipotence.
Well, the ability to create. I mean,
okay, yeah, that's probably the only thing you can say, right?
Yep.
I still haven't heard a good reason. Like when you said I have good reason because you said it seems incomprehensible that the natural world could formulate existence and humanity and the world the way it is. I don't think that's a good reason to believe in God. You could just say, look, we don't understand fully how the natural world has formulated everything, but that's not evidence for God. That's a God of the gaps argument. You're just essentially saying, I can't explain this, therefore it must be God. So I just, this is where, like, again, I've said this to you before, Rebecca, like if you want to take the position that I'm not going to use science, I'm not going to use the scientific method, I'm not going to use naturalism as a method to understanding God, fine. I'm not necessarily arguing against that. If you just want to say, I have a belief statement, I can't really explain it, but I know in my heart that I believe that God exists. That's a harder argument for me to go up against, as opposed to saying, look, I think that there are rational, reasonable, well-supported pieces of evidence that suggest that God exists. I just don't think that is a argument that can be sustained. But the other one is harder for me to argue against because I can't know what's in your heart. I can't know any of those things.
Yeah. Let me give Jamie, Russell, and James a chance to chime in. Did you guys have something that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I do. So for me, if somebody takes the position that they intuitively know that there's a God, that's not a problem for me. There's a lot of deists in the world who say that, and it's not a problem for me. A lot of Christians, again, not a problem for me. The problem I have is with and I want to call it bigotry because that's what it is. When a Christian looks at atheists and says something like, you are being somehow character deficient to come to your conclusion that there's no God. If I intuitively know, then so do you. And if you don't, then it's because there's something wrong with your character. You're not humble enough. You're not honest enough. You're not loving enough. You're not something. And if you were, and you're choosing not to on some level, but if you were, then you would see God because you would be open to see God, and then you would want to be close to God. And then, of course, God is always like the God of whatever religious person's talking. So my problem isn't that there are religious people in the world. I don't have a problem with that at all. It's the bigotries that come with the narrative that are built into it, because in order to justify the idea that everybody is obligated morally to embrace this idea of a God, you have to assume that there's a moral character flaw in play for why they don't. And every once in a while, you'll let it slip out.
Rebecca's saying that, though.
She did earlier. She did just like 5 minutes ago. She said that.
She said what exactly?
That basically you should believe. Like it's
you're giving an off, but you're not saying I'm morally depraved because I don't.
If you were humble enough. Now, if a Christian says it's not a moral issue or not a moral character issue, then they forfeit the premise upon which to say that that their God could justify judging you for your disbelief. They have to rest on the position that it's a morally relevant issue, and for that it has to be relevant to character. If they say that it's not, then they deny their God all available premise upon which to judge anybody for their disbelief.
James, you are so logical. I love and articulate. I love the way that you put that, and I will tell you that you're right. I let it slip out sometimes that I do often think of it as a moral deficiency. But I also look, and so I admit that I did that earlier. But I will say there's another way that I think about it too. that doesn't have to do with your moral character. And that is, I do believe that, there's a demonic realm. There are beings that are actively trying to prevent you from receiving the truth. And so I don't fully put the blame on every atheist, because I also think there's other spiritual beings involved. Yeah. And not only that, but even other people in the world. I blame all of the evolutionary scientists that are trying to tell you that you can be evolved by natural processes. I blame them because they taught you that you don't need God to exist. And so, that's like, I think there's a couple of sources. There's lots of lies in the world, and it's not always someone's fault that they have been raised, in a lie.
But I was raised a Christian, Rebecca.
I know. I don't know what happened to you, Doug. I'm perplexed, and I'm hoping you're Peter and not Judas, but I am concerned about you.
See, I think Judas gets a bad rap. I mean, if it wasn't for Judas, there would be no sacrifice in Christianity. Really, there should be a Saint Judas Day for all Christians, honestly.
I'm not sure it's a moral deficiency. I think that necessarily anyway.
Oh, go ahead, James.
No, I was just saying I don't know that it's a moral deficiency, like to not believe. I don't know if I have to think about that. It doesn't appear that way.
Well, if it is a moral deficiency, then at least according to Calvinism, it's because of God's moral deficiency for not regenerating my heart.
True.
Oh, sure. So wherever it's not a moral deficiency, if we say it's because we've been tricked or deceived by science or by some other situation in life, then that reduces everything to a fate lottery, because I just happen to not hear the right words the right way at the right time.
Yeah.
Or, and that's not a just system.
There's a quote by, I can't remember the quote, it's by Galileo or who, I can forget, but it's like, I don't believe in a God that gave us intelligence and rational thought and intended us to forego their use. It's either like Newton or Galileo, but that kind of goes along the line of like, why would God give us all these amazing abilities to understand the world, and that the world being structured in such a way, but create it in a way that like he doesn't intend us to want to use those methods to understand the world. So it seemed from a omnipotent aspect, it seems illogical to me that God wouldn't want me to understand the world in that manner.
I didn't say that, though.
Yeah, we would say that.
I'm coming against the theory of evolution, not against science. And I know for you, those two things are equal. So, I mean, I understand that you would understand me that way. But, I mean, I'm very much a believer that God did create you with a mind, and he wants you to use it. Nidimos, go ahead.
But you believe that you don't correct me if I'm wrong, but you believe in a young earth, and you believe in do you believe in a literal translation of the Bible? Is that correct?
Yes. Okay.
So, but your perspective would be that science is just wrong. It's just wrong around evolutionary theory. Like it's wrong. What about like geological evidence? But that science is just wrong on those topics.
Well, you're using the term science, but
okay,
but I would like to make the distinction that some scientists, so there are some scientists who believe what I believe. There are some scientists who believe what you believe. So this is not a question of science. It's it's about which scientists you're going to believe.
Well, that's somewhat of a loaded response, because it's not like we have 50% of scientists who believe X and 50% of scientists who believe Y. It's like the 99.9% of scientists, the scientific consensus, are in agreement on these positions. Not just in agreement, like as an example, the age of the Earth. It's not just an agreement from a geological perspective. It's an agreement from a biochemical perspective, from a biological perspective. From these,
some of them are Christians.
Separate models that don't even interact all confirm each other. And so it just seems like I'm not against the weakness of, like, in some ways in these arguments, science has a weakness where science is provisional. Most scientists are never going to come forward and say, we absolutely know for sure something. So I feel like the other side uses that to say, aha, you can't know with absolute certainty that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Therefore, there is a possibility that the Earth is 6,000 years old. So I gotcha.
But this is not the real issue for Rebecca, I don't think, right, Rebecca? Because I think if you became convinced next year that evolution via common descent is true, you'd still be a Christian, right?
I'd probably find a way to reconcile it.
Yeah, there you go.
Like
So
William
this
Lane
is not
Craig
the deep issue for her. I don't know if it's morality. What do you think it is, Rebecca? Like,
What do you mean? What do you mean by it's the deep issue? Like what deep issue?
if it's
What-
true that you could accept evolution via common descent and still be a Christian and reconcile it some way, that tells me that there's something more fundamental than how we came to be that is the main cause of your belief.
Well, it's what we are in ourselves. Like, I mean, you have a conscious mind. You can think, you can sense, you can experience the world. There's beauty, there's love, there's all kinds of things. There's good tasting food. I mean,
Okay,
these are
that's
not the type
consciousness. So we can summarize all that with consciousness, right? So let's say, I'll ask, this is like street epistemology. Let's say I was to ask you, a year from now, we create out of matter a fully conscious robot.
Yeah.
Are you out of Christianity?
No.
So consciousness is not it either.
No, because we are intelligent beings. And if we were somehow able to create an intelligence, then that would just be another sign that intelligence is required to create intelligence.
But see, Doug is getting to this point. It's like, what turns on this? Like, what if you said,
magic.
I was able to determine that consciousness, we can create consciousness, and you're like, okay, I agree. Consciousness is not this mysterious thing. Or we're like, evolutionary theory can be proved 100%. And you're like, okay, I agree. Evolution is true. Or that the Earth is 4.5 billion years. I can prove that. That's true. You would still say you believe in God. So then those issues technically are not the deciding factor on your God belief.
Okay, so let's do this. I'll tell you what experience could turn everything. Put a cardboard box or let's say a glass box, okay, and leave it, nothing in it, and let something appear. Let a consciousness develop from absolutely nothing in that box. Okay, that would change my mind.
Okay, very good. So, but we start with matter, right? So you're saying if matter,
you're starting with an empty box.
Well, you got a box.
All right, good. Yeah, I'll give you the box, even though we should start with nothing, absolutely nothing. But I'm giving you the box.
So, do you believe we started with absolutely nothing?
Well, no created matter. Yeah.
Okay, but what if we had matter, and that created consciousness? You're saying you leave Christianity.
If it spontaneously came about by itself, sure.
Okay. Now, do we have any evidence that matter came out of nothing?
No.
Okay. So then why are you so confident that it did?
Because it had to come from somewhere, guys, right? So what are my options? Either a being created it or it came out of nothing. That really is the option.
No, there's a third option you missed.
Okay, what is it?
Matter always existed.
No,
Isn't that an option, Jamie?
I don't think so.
But is that a possible option? You have to answer yes. You have.
I would say no. It seems like it's not a possible option. It seems like it's an impossibility by what we do know. Because don't the smallest particles decay like eventually? Don't they say that?
And decay into other things, right?
Well, I don't
Conservation
think so.
of matter.
They say the universe will end. That suggests that everything decays.
Yeah, our reality will end, but that doesn't mean all matter ends.
Proton decay or whatever.
He's talking about entropy, I think.
Yeah.
But what about the matter? What about matter would cause us to think that it could spontaneously, or that it, I mean, I guess you could say it always existed, but what would cause it to order itself in the order that we have it in this universe?
What would cause it to order itself? Like, basically, you could say a brute fact of something called gravity. Gravity attracts things. Why does it attract things? I don't know. It just does. But notice what the answer I just gave is the same answer you would give for God's nature. Why is
Yes.
God's nature the way it is? It just is. I don't know. It has to
It's
be that way,
true.
Doug, right? So why do you get to use that for God's nature and I can't give this explanation for, let's say, the fundamental reality of matter?
Well, because mine is more reasonable. Because I mean, I'm not saying you can't say it. You can't.
A
say
disembodied
it. It's just
mind's
you won't
more
be
reasonable.
I'll say it. You
Absolutely.
can't. You're not allowed.
Absolutely. Because every example we have of intelligence and order and things that we observe in this world, it is created by intelligence,
How do you
right?
know that?
Everything.
Everything that we observe, yes. So
Okay,
why
how
do
do you know
you
the
think
difference?
my glass box
Rebecca, you know that's
Look,
not true.
Let me give you, okay, I'm going to give you a rock in the glass box. Now, will that ever form into a conscious living being? That rock.
Well, the definition
You
of
know
living
it
being
won't.
has carbon in it.
You
So if
know
there
it
isn't
won't.
carbon in it, then it won't.
Okay, I give you a chunk of coal. There you go. You got a chunk of coal in a box. Now, is that going to eventually form itself into a living conscious being? You know the answer is no.
If it's just a rock, yeah, what we know about nature, no.
Oh,
Is
here
this
we go.
design? Is this
No.
designed by an intelligent being?
No.
It's designed by the wind.
Is it the wind an intelligent being?
No.
Do you see patterns?
Yes.
Why can't the way we came about just be very more complex than this, but really a non-intelligent being created or made us? I got to use like that type of terminology, just the same way as these sand dunes.
Because
natural
there's
forces.
a huge difference in a sand dune and a living conscious being.
Right. So for you, it's just we're more complicated than that sand dune.
That's an understatement.
Right.
Yes.
But this is where you're at an impasse. You just can't. But these sand dunes have order, structure, patterns, no mind behind it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one step forwards.
Well, if you think life can happen on its own, why not
Just
think?
chipping away, huh? Go ahead. Sorry, Jamie.
If you think life can form from chemical evolution, it seems like you should be skeptical to think something like Mount Rushmore could happen naturally too. I mean, why not? Isn't everything natural? Does it need a mind? I mean, why not think? What would make you think or be sure about something that man made that could be done theoretically by erosion?
I mean, she probably would agree with that because she believes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Rebecca doesn't agree with like the law of uniformitarianism or Lyell and Hutton's work in geology of like long, slow, gradual processes can create these types of things like mountains. But many creationists are like, look, how could a mountain have formed like without the influence of God?
Was this created by intelligent mind, Jamie?
Yeah.
It wasn't. This is just a piece of wood.
Yeah, right. I think you made that.
No, this is a piece of wood.
Indeed, but
that a human has never touched other than to pick it up and put it in there.
Okay, but I mean, you're showing a chunk of wood. How about Mount Rushmore? Doug, can Mount Rushmore?
This is the same as the
Can
sand.
Mount Rushmore happen by natural processes? Would you tell your kids if you didn't know the origin of Mount Rushmore? If you did not know the origin of Mount Rushmore, you had never heard of it.
Eileen, no.
You would say it couldn't happen by natural processes.
Yeah, but even an atheist, a naturalist could be listening and say, given like an infinite amount of iterations, you could get it. But I'll give it to you. That's fine. But the thing is, I believe that we evolved to have an intelligent mind that can create that.
But even a kid would know that was made by people, like at a very young age.
Yes, I'm not
no history about that sort of model making or sculpture making, and they would know. I think that whole thing that we know because we know people made it. I don't think that's right. I think kids would know without having much of a background.
But we have to be very careful when we look at nature and say, okay, this is design, and so therefore God, because of stuff like this.
Like it's exactly because Jamie, when you looked at that, you were like, no, a person did that. But we know for a fact that there are things in nature that form naturally that humans and our human brains anthropomorphize those things. Like,
Indeed.
it's well known our brains like look for patterns when there are no patterns. So I agree with you, the Mount Rushmore thing. Like that thought experiment is an interesting one to explore, but humans do search for patterns where there are and find patterns where there are no patterns. And we know that this happens.
And notice that you would stop with God, right? Like you look at God and the complexity of God or the beauty of God, whatever you want to say, and you don't say there's a creator for him.
Right.
There's no intelligent mind that created him. So you do have a stopping point. You just call it God, whereas naturalists would say nature. So we're the same.
Yeah.
Necessary attributes.
Yeah, and I could say the same thing to you, Jamie, about the let's say the gravitational force. It's a necessary attribute.
It's by necessity. I wanted to say one thing to Jason, because about the young Earth creation thing, like we get the weight of the scientific community disagreeing, but it's not like we don't understand. It's not like I don't think, nuclear, the elements decay and to daughter isotopes at a certain rate that can be measured. I believe that. I believe like geology can, erosion and deposition can happen at a certain rate. We know that many aspects of evolutionary theory is totally valid. We just have stopping points, and we recognize what the differences between models, which have somewhat of an assumption, no matter how reasonable, and we have other reasons to think other things are true. But it's not a total denial of the science.
I mean, are you a young Earth creationist, Jamie?
I am.
Okay, so you acknowledge the scientific methodologies and these processes. You think the conclusions are incorrect.
Not necessary. And because of other reasons I have from experience and, theological beliefs and, that I would say are based on decent evidence or reason to question some of it. I've changed some of my views over time, and I try to pay attention to it somewhat. Obviously, I don't know everything about it, but I think there's defeating indicators in science that suggest there's problems with a lot of the geologic models. Why do fossils exist if erosion rates, measured erosion rates? It just doesn't make any sense. It should have been totally recycled over.
I'm just curious, and I understand that you may see this as like an appeal to an authority or whatever, but I'm just curious, why is it that we have such a huge mass of evidence and scientific consensus on these topics? Again, in all these
converging evidence from different fields, I would say that's not as much of a convergence as you think, and more of like a lot of it is assumptions that were developed at the same time. I'm not saying it's totally that way. I'm not saying there isn't some things that are good evidence for an older universe or whatever. I'm not denying that. But I'm saying when people say there's this convergence and there's no influence from the other fields, I don't actually buy that totally. I think these are
But look at a guy like Francis Collins. He's the poster child of a guy who loves Jesus deeply, who believes in common descent. Well, what is he missing? What do you know that he doesn't?
The truth.
No,
look, he just like most people have been indoctrinated from a young age. They never questioned it. They never even, by the time they got to their scientific training, they already so deeply believed it that
you're describing fundamentalist Christianity right now too.
Yeah,
right?
I was thinking that. Sure,
absolutely.
He doesn't have as much weight for his other reasons as maybe we do, so he feels totally fine with that compliance. I don't, obviously I have influence from. I grew up in a younger creationist church.
He doesn't have as much reasons, though, Jamie. Sounds a bit.
No. I mean,
it's literally his career.
No, I mean, his theological considerations aren't as heavy as mine, obviously, to some level, right? And he probably knows more about biology than I do. I don't deny it.
Look at the binary trees.
Okay, so look, we haven't heard from Nathan yet, and Deepak just got here, so let's hear from them. And we also haven't heard from James in a while. So
Nathan just did a stream, right?
Yeah, I just did a stream.
I checked Nathan's channel before I planned this, but yeah.
Anyway. Did you want to restrict conversation to Numbers 1 to 5, or is it anything goes?
Well, we've kind of gone off topic, and that was my fault because I was telling a story of something God did for me recently. So it was my fault that took us off. So if you want to go back to Numbers 1 through 5, you can, but you're also welcome to chime in on anything that we have been talking about.
But Rebecca,
Numbers
that's
is
like
my-
an infinity of numbers. Why do you only want to talk about the first 5? I don't get it.
Oh, because at the beginning of the stream, I read the first 5 chapters of Numbers. And so I'm going through the whole Bible, and I took a year-long break. Okay,
chapter 5 is the interesting one.
Do you like chapter 5?
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about it then.
What's your understanding, if you just summarize it in 1 or 2 sentences? What's Numbers 5 about?
If a husband gets jealous and thinks his wife committed adultery, they go to the priest, and a woman takes basically a test to find out if she's innocent or not. And if she doesn't, her abdomen doesn't swell up. What's that?
There's a phrase, isn't there? Like her leg runs or something. Like there's like a weird the way that it's
rot.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
That's the King James.
Is it?
Okay, but you were saying if she fails the test, what happens?
Well, then her abdomen swells up, and then everybody knows she's guilty, and then she'll be killed. And if she doesn't, if nothing happens to her, then she's innocent.
What if she's pregnant and she fails the test?
The baby dies.
Yep. So, and this is the commandment of Yahweh, right?
Yeah.
So Yahweh's saying that if a woman cheats on her husband and is pregnant, if she's pregnant, I will kill the woman and the baby.
Yes.
There you have it. God sanctioned abortion.
Yeah, but that's a beautiful thing, sending babies straight to heaven. Just such a beautiful thing. We should send more babies to heaven.
Would you agree that's God sanctioned abortion, Rebecca? Because it's a human
I wouldn't
fixing
phrase
the drink.
it that way. I wouldn't phrase it that way.
It's the killing of the unborn, intentional killing of the unborn.
Well, I as I said, I wouldn't phrase it that way.
Why not? It's by definition.
Well, it actually seems to me to be a protection for a woman against accusations of adultery. So
yeah, but what if the woman thinks, this
Wait, did the text
drink's not going to kill me?
Does the text insist that there's a conception there? I can't remember.
Couldn't you say the same about cases of abortion? That you could say, well, this is a protection of a woman against, like the economic problems that she'll face if she has to raise a child, for example.
Oh, no DHS.
Well, the difference is that one is God saying to do it, and the other is just humans taking killing.
What if the abortion doctor says God told him to do it?
Well, then he'd be wrong.
But what better?
Doesn't God speak to people through dreams and visions?
Absolutely.
What if the doctor had a dream and vision to do this abortion for this one particular lady, and he obeys the vision and word of God?
Well, if your dream or vision is contrary to
it's not contrary if God commands it.
But he didn't command it. He
did Numbers 5.
This is not in the new covenant, right? So if you're not an ancient, Israelite, if you're not an ancient Israelite, then that does not apply to you. You cannot.
Okay, so morality changes.
It's not protection. It's meant to be a punishment. That's why it's a reflection of when Moses put the stick in the water and told the people they had to drink as a punishment for what they did. This was a punishment. It wasn't an act of mercy to protect the woman. This was a reflection. And that's why Mary later, that's why her name is Mary, because she passed the virginity test of the bitter waters of Marah. So she couldn't be cursed or carry the curse.
Can't you make a case? You could make a case for the messianic line too, but I won't, I guess.
But I want to just point out, Rebecca, what you said. Well, this is old, that's old covenant, that's new covenant. You're admitting to this a version of subjective morality right there, right?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, killing a woman and her baby, unborn baby, through a special water potion is not always wrong throughout all history and all time. It's wrong today in the new covenant, but not wrong back in the Old Testament, correct?
Exactly.
So the exact same action given in two different places in history One's right, morally right. One's morally wrong.
Well, there's a lesser evil. Is it okay to lie because we can lie to the Nazis or whatever? Come on. Is this really a...
So do you agree, Jamie, that in the exact same action in one point of history is morally right, and the exact same action in another point of history is morally wrong?
There's lesser evil, perhaps. You could make a case that there's a...
No, morally right in one case and morally wrong.
Yeah, there is no... I mean, in that sense, you can't always say that in a fallen world.
So you agree in the exact same action in one case is morally right and in another case morally wrong?
I agree.
Now, isn't that subjective morality?
No, it's a lesser evil. It's the weightier measures of the law.
One's right, morally right, not a lesser.
No, because there can be circumstances where you have two choices and both are not ideal.
No, one's morally right, sanctioned by God, and is morally right by definition. How can you say it's a lesser evil? It's not evil at all.
Because morality is ultimately about,
lesser evils.
Sam Harris's thing.
I think so. Here's what the theists can do, right? So it's not subjective because it doesn't depend on like the person's kind of mental state or their values or anything. There is an objective fact of the matter in each case, but it changes at different times.
Yeah, it's up to God's subjective nature.
Wait, I don't see why this is. I'm failing to see why this is a problem. It's like there's a principle that this is wrong, but if there's two things that are the only options, one is prevents lesser evil or greater.
I mean, this is why I think it's a problem for you, because many Christians like you, and I'm guessing here, would say that there is objective truth, that you can say a specific action is always wrong throughout all time and all history. And it's because it's not based on human opinion, it's based on God's nature. But here we have an example of God's nature saying the exact same action back then is morally right, not a lesser of two evils. It is good by definition because God commanded it. But if you do the exact same thing today, it's morally wrong. Which
Rebecca you're going to find tons of those examples in the Bible. I mean, it's not going to just be one. There's going to be, probably 50 or to 100 things that we could point to in the Bible that was okay at one time and not okay now.
It's not a problem. I still don't see why it's a problem. It's like they're like all things being perfect, you wouldn't do it. But you can come up with a circumstance where
Jamie,
it makes sense.
Jamie, it's a problem because you can't say any action is morally wrong until you know the mind of God.
Well, the morality shark is here. He heard morality and he jumped in. So maybe he needs to chime in on this.
I expect he's going to back me up.
Oh, I guess he's doing something else right now. We can't.
But you get that, Jamie? What I just said, that you can't say name any action a human.
Oh, because if I say it's wrong, that God permitted it or whatever, then I'm ascribing that to God as a sin or something.
No. He's saying it's subjective.
Name any action, Jamie, that you think is always wrong that one human can do to another.
Right. I get what you're saying. No, I get what you're saying.
You can't, right? Because I could always.
There's never any time where there's something couldn't be a lesser of evil, and so.
No. Yeah. You keep saying lesser evil. When God commands it, is it a lesser evil? No, it's morally good.
Happen in the circumstances, yeah.
Well, in some way, it is a lesser evil because if we were all doing according to God's will, a test like that would never be necessary. Right. So, it is a lesser of two evils because,
isn't that
what
God's commandment as a lesser evil?
I'm admitting it's an evil. Isn't that throwing you a bone for, yeah, it's an evil in a sense.
So you're saying God commands evil?
Well, it's like hate your mother and father. It's like a scale.
Oh my goodness. Does God command evil, Jamie?
Only when it's necessary.
Oh my goodness. Good night, everyone.
Murder is evil, but God kills people. It's like that sort of thing. I don't know.
That seems like an incredibly big concession. God commands evil.
It's a heresy.
I would say
it's not totally wrong. It's kind of biblical.
Wait, I think aren't you guys having different definitions of evil? Isn't that the problem? So for Jane, like for you, like evil is anything that might. Yeah, I'm not actually exactly sure what you're talking about when you talk about evil.
Yeah,
as far as Jamie is concerned, Jamie's just saying God can't take command like a net negative utility action, right? Like in other words, he positively affect some things and negatively affect other things, right? But the total effect must be positive. That's all that Jamie is saying.
Yeah, that's what I mean by necessary.
Yeah.
Well, no, but Jamie, what do you mean by evil? Define evil.
All things being, perfect, he wouldn't command it.
What? How about like abortion? Is abortion evil?
Yeah, it's killing someone.
Except when God
Jamie,
sanctions
by
it,
the
right?
same definition, though, right? Like it could be conceivable that abortion is the lesser of two evils. Like, for example,
Right. Just like I don't want to ban abortions for every circumstance.
Right.
Most Christians would answer the question I just asked, define evil as something going against the nature of God.
Yeah.
But you're not one of those Christians.
But isn't this just subjectivity? It just seems subjective. Morals are subjective. It depends on the situation. There's not any objectiveness.
No, there is an objective thing. Like it's a lesser evil. It's in that context, it's still something God. It's just like when God allows. He doesn't like a divorce, but he allows it.
Okay. So then so then in that situation, when abortion then and abortion now, they're both immoral. It's
right. Ultimately, all things being perfect, but you could come to a circumstance where it would make sense, like to save like a whole boatload of people, and then have to, like the trolley experiment or whatever thought experiment.
So if you choose the lesser of two evils, are you being immoral? Jamie, now I'm confused. Are you saying that it's actually immoral to even the act of choosing the lesser of two evils is immoral?
Only it could be, depending on, intentions come into play, it seems to me. So like I would want to say God's not being immoral in the ultimate sense. Or I might have to, punt to saying he's permitting it in some way, and he's like with the thing with sending the Spirit to confuse Saul or whatever, but God doesn't like directly do it, but he allows it. He permits like a spirit to do the bidding or whatever. It gets complicated, right? It's problematic.
Jamie, do you agree with my definition of evil? Evil is that which goes against the nature of God.
Right. I do.
Okay. So then that's the point I was making. Any action one human can do to another human, you cannot say is evil unless you know and are almost 100% convinced that God didn't sanction it first. So you have to know the mind of God in order to say something's truly evil.
Yeah,
it can't really be objective. It has to be subjective to your understanding and interpretation of God's character.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I have a strong sense of the like morals coming from the character of God, but I think just like with the flood or whatever, like God didn't like murdering everybody, but it's not really murder, right? But it's
right. But this character of God has a precedent of killing the unborn.
Taking a precedent. What do you mean?
He's done it in the past.
Why wouldn't he just not allow that to happen? If abortion is immoral or evil, and in some situations you can do it, in other situations you can't, it doesn't seem logical that a God who is triomni would allow that. Why wouldn't he just deal with the situation so that wouldn't actually happen?
Rebecca, do you want to handle that one?
Oh, could I say something? Because I joined because of the moral stuff.
Yeah, I can respond to that later if we want, but let's let the other people who've joined talk, because there's like 4 people who haven't said anything. Go ahead, Lance.
Well, it's your channel, Rebecca, so I'm happy to.
Of course,
defer to you, of course, every time.
No, I know.
Well, there's a couple things. One is that there just seems to be a straightforward contradiction in some of what Jamie has said, which is Jamie seemed to both concede that God can command evil, but then also agreed to characterize evil in terms of something being inconsistent with like the nature of God. So is Jamie, and I guess this isn't straightforwardly contradictory, can God command something that's inconsistent with his nature? I mean, if yes, then there's not a contradiction. But if God could not or would not command something inconsistent with his nature, it seems then inconsistent to say both God couldn't or wouldn't command something inconsistent with nature and that God in fact does so. That you can't have both. So that seems like a problem.
I see what you're saying, and maybe I'm going to realize that what I'm saying is dumb later. But it seems like I do take a strong sense that God, can't commit moral evil. But it seems from Scripture that there's circumstances where, like, it suggests God is not happy about it, but like certain things have to be permitted. So as far as commanding, like ultimately, like from a ultimate point of view, all things being perfect. Yeah, like God isn't going to command evil. I'm going to want to hold to that. But I think in the sense he has to permit it, because if he said no, you can't do that, then some other greater evil is going to occur. In other words, I don't know.
Right. So I think I don't think that you're actually stuck with any kind of contradiction here. I just think that you shouldn't. People should be careful about what they mean by evil and what they mean by the lesser of two evils and that sort of thing. That there could be a lot of equivocation or sliding in definitions going on here.
Yeah.
Making it look like there's a contradiction what you're saying when there's not. So I'll give an example. So let's say that the only way to save a person would be to amputate a limb. Now, you could say it's good to amputate the limb because it saves their life, and the alternative is them dying, and it's better to amputate the limb than for them to die. But you could say, relative to a counterfactual where you could save them without having to amputate the limb, it would be best to do that. But God, we could be dealing in the real world with practical situations where God, because of free will or constraints that humans are subject to, but that God in principle wouldn't be subject to, it's like you got to kill one person or kill 5 people, and you only have one of the 2 options. And God could say, kill the 1 person to save the 5 in this particular circumstance. You could say, well, it's the lesser of 2 evils, but it's only like evil relative to some idealized counterfactual where you don't have to kill anybody. But in the context where those are your only 2 options, God commanding you to kill 1 to save 5, I wouldn't consider that to be evil. I would consider that in other words, the least bad option is often the good option, relative to the rest of the situation. So I don't see a contradiction here. I don't see a problem with in and of itself, God commanding you to do the lesser of the 2 bad things. However, where I think that the critics can come in is they could say, look, if God really is omnipotent and all good, God could have just created a scenario where you don't have to make either of those decisions. You could just have nobody ever die. Why didn't God do that? And I'm not sure how Christians can handle that question. So, there's all the theodicies and ways that Christians try to respond to that. I don't find them very convincing, but this just pushes us all the way back to the basic problem of why does anything bad happen if there's this good being? And I haven't personally found anything persuasive on that front.
I have a theodicy for that. I think the best theodicy is we can't really it'd be hard to map out or to be sure of it, but it seems to me that kind of like when you look at Job and you look at God allowing, Satan in the garden and that sort of thing, and he allows them to choose, that seems to be important, right? So it's like the free will theodicy with the ideas of God trying to pull a remnant out of people that have faith or trust in him, and he's kind of silencing the accusation of Pine Creek, in other words. So he has rules of engagement where it's constrained free will, but it's balanced in such a way that it achieves the purpose of
That's a horrible theodicy.
silencing Pine Creek. So in the end, no more Pine Creek.
Do you know what I say to that, what you just said? Have
What?
you ever listened to my channel?
Yeah, all the time.
It's not the problem of evil is not if you bring up free will, it's not about the free will of humans, it's about the free will of your God. Your God did he have the free will to create or not?
Yeah, I think so.
So if he had the free will not to create, knowing that it would lead to something he hates, why create?
Oh no, because in the end it'll be worth it.
It'll be worth it. Does God need something?
He'll have a remnant bride that loves and trusts him in such a way that they won't fall again with their free will intact.
Couldn't he just do that without all that stuff?
Well, could he determine free will creatures to do a particular thing? It seems like an automatic contradiction in terms.
But doesn't this ultimately just get back to if he needs all those things, these redemptive qualities of doing something evil to get to something good in order to allow these free will beings to do it? It seems like that just becomes God's a dick. God, he could have done all these things and not had that happen, but
how with robots or
by not creating?
He's God. He can do anything. He's omnipotent. He has the ability to get whatever bachelor. Well, no, whatever value that is imbued based on somebody who has free will making a decision, and therefore they come to some recognition. Why couldn't he make humans have that recognition without going through that process? It seems like if he's omnipotent, he could do those things, but instead he has to go through this convoluted process of
just not create humans.
Well, I mean, why didn't he just kill Lucifer when he fell right away, right? Apparently that would have an effect on the other created beings that have free will. He's actually trying to do it in a way that demonstrates, so in a way like God's on trial or whatever, in a sense, you could say, but why can't he create beings to do a certain particular way that wouldn't be free? Maybe that's magic in some sense. I can't explain free will, but it seems evidently true.
Well, I have lots to say about that, but I don't want to hog the time. I think Chris wants to say something, though.
Yeah, thanks, James. Well, one of the things that I wanted to say is that basically, morality is subjective. And it's subjective until society comes in and basically says this is the objectivity that we want to follow. So we'll go with that. If you don't agree, fine, that's with you, but expect the consequences. Second of all, we're so really hung up with the concept of good and evil, and we often associate and how we associate it and assign it on how it looks. Say it's like pick your superstitious trickster god or whatever, and it's just that we kind of associate one figure that is all good and the other figure all bad, and with the Catholicism, from what I can see, is that we've took as the tradition is that we took whatever feels other-ish, mostly like the Celtic tradition of the Druids, and basically associated that to the heads goat and stuff like that as demonic, and that's how we kind of basically placed instead like that. However, on the same level, it's like we have seen like everything that's like associated with paradise, heaven, and everything. It's all like clean and all like pretty much like it's like pristine, and it's like, and to a certain degree, as if it was everything was just like all sparkling and stuff. And we have to. Well, what I think we need to get off that rail is to just detach from this image that we have of what is good, aka heaven or whatever, and then what hell looks like, because it's a different thing. Anyway, sorry.
Can I ask Lance a quick question about the previous conversation? Lance, do you think the logical problem of evil actually goes through, or do you think, like, at a logical level, like, I don't know, like Platinga's response or something?
Good question.
It's just not my area of specialization. Would you be able to just like summarize the argument for me?
Yeah, so the logical problem of evil is what like you usually hear on the internet, right? Like it's logically a contradiction for an omnipotent, for a God that has all three omni properties, and for evil to exist, because such a God would be able to prevent any evil from happening, right? I mean, I'm kind of sloppy statement, but so that's
fair enough. Yeah. When I look at an argument like that, it looks fine to me. Part of the issue is that I have issues with the very concept of evil, and some of the presuppositions that are built into notions surrounding morality,
right.
Where I'm not really sure what that's supposed to mean.
So I think like the back formulation is like something like evil. I mean, it just means that like evil is defined as what ought not to be done, right? And if an
right, that's not good enough. That's not going to be good enough for me because I don't know what that means.
The point is though that
what that means.
Subjective to that being, then. Like that being has some notion of what ought to be done and what ought not to be done. It's omnipotent, right? And so evil should not exist.
If the argument is supposed to target a theist, then it's sufficient that the theist be signed up to evil existing, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right, but then I'm dealing with the logical consistency between propositions that I don't understand and aren't sufficiently intelligible for me to know whether they're propositional or not.
But haven't I, like the version I get, like the last thing I said, does that not make like what is still missing?
No, it's not going to be good enough for me. So I'm going to have problems with the intelligibility of the very concepts that are built into the premises. So I just don't really have a means of assessing it.
So which one? Like for me, like for the version I was just telling, right, was, evil is just like what ought not to be done according to the being that's omnipotent, right?
According to the being?
Yeah, like it's dependent on the stance of the omnipotent being. Like there are things that ought not to be done, but still get done.
I mean, I would have to see this presented in like syllogistic form, and then I would have to see the premise, and then I'd have to examine the premise. I'm not going to comment on a sort of
okay, fair enough.
Like a half-baked or underdeveloped argument where I can't look at the specific logical structure of the argument.
Okay.
So I don't know. I'd have to look.
Nathan,
okay, I could look one up, but then I
Nathan's view on
questions
this.
of the premises. So yeah, sorry if I don't have.
No, I'm looking one up and I'll share it, and then maybe later I can ask you about it.
Nathan, does the logical problem of evil fail?
Yes.
Why?
Because theists have adequate resources to respond to the argument and remain consistent and not accept its conclusion.
And what's the main argument you've heard that theists use?
Yeah.
That it's possible that an all good God would permit evil. That's all they need.
Morally sufficient reasons.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily that. So it could be, for example, like the free will defense. All that shows is that it just shows possibility, right? So if you're making a logical claim, then you can't have any possibility. So if you're going to say there's evil in the world is the result of our free will, and you admit that that's a possible state of affairs, or if the theist claims that that's a possible state of affairs, well then, it's not going to be logically inconsistent.
What about my logical argument against God with the problem of evil that I use?
I think that is a stronger argument because I don't hear theists respond with good reasons, but I think it's still going to be an unsuccessful argument for, as we've kind of seen in this conversation. I think it should compel theists to rational belief revision, but it doesn't. Instead, they'll accept all sorts of claims that I find really implausible and retain that God exists, rather than accept, the premises and conclusion of the argument. And
for those of you who don't know, one of the arguments I make is, and I got a couple of versions, but one, I'll use scripture. So if I'm talking to a Christian, I'll say, I'll ask, does God desire anyone to perish? Or I can put in a premise, God desires none to perish. But yet he created a world knowing with 100% certainty, omniscience, that some would perish. God wants, God doesn't want. Contradiction, logically.
Right, but that's why, right? Like that's why, like omnipotence is usually understood as God can only actuate situations that don't involve a logical contradiction. Meaning, God can't create a squared circle, right? If two people are playing chess, God can't even both of them, right? So this is an example. That would be like yours is an example of something that's like logically impossible for God to create a world where there's free will, and some people choose, and people only choose to do the right thing, including no death and so on.
But I think prior to God wanting that all are saved, he wants that people have free will and can freely choose to love.
Potentially that misses the point of my argument.
God.
Wait, but didn't I address it though?
No, you missed the point too. The point is, if God's omniscient and he's not surprised, he sees the future with 100% certainty, and he knows that by creating, he'll create something he doesn't want. But yet he desired to create what he doesn't want. He wants, doesn't want.
Okay,
he
so
wants to create, knowing that will lead to something that he doesn't want.
Yes, but
then the right response is to say
you're struggling in determinism.
He prefers to not creating, because then he can have free agents which freely will choose to love him.
Totally relevant.
So that's his preference to not creating.
If his preference is not to create, then why did he create?
Even taking, because he prefers to create, because he
prefers to create, but his preference is not to create. You just contradicted yourself.
No, you are creating a framework which is not necessary. He has
You're
two
struggling
options.
In determinism.
He has two options. One is to not create and remaining alone. The other is to create a world where there are free agents which can actually decide not to obey him and to do evil, but he has also then free agents which actually will obey him and will then be with him eternally. So that's the state of affairs that he prefers to having no created world.
He prefers no created world, but he prefers to create a world.
No, he prefers, maybe Rebecca can.
He desires that none should perish, but some will perish because of their own choice. And so, I mean, I don't see a contradiction there. But I wanted to hear from James, because I think James had like something that he wanted to respond to on this problem of evil, although we've been going so long. I don't know if he remembers what he wanted to say. Are you still there, James?
I certainly am. So let's think about it this way. In heaven, let's suppose that there's some Christian version or narrative that's true. So people get into heaven. If people are allowed to have free will in heaven, but never sin again, then why not create people such that they have free will, but can be assured to never sin? Because if that's obviously possible according to the Christian narrative, because that's what's supposed to happen in heaven. So why not start humans off that way?
Yeah, that's my view too. It may not seem logically inconsistent to say that God exists, but if we follow along these lines, it creates a God that is just not in alignment with what we understand God to be. God's like essentially like saying, look, I'm going to create these beings that are, and the evil is actually allowed to get to another point when he himself could have just created it without that.
Because God desired character building, Jason.
Oh yeah, he wants to build. Yeah, all right.
I wanted to bring up an issue with this free will stuff too, which is that there's no problem with God creating people with the ability to do evil, but they have no desire to do evil, and then they just, as a matter of fact, never do so. Like for instance, so Christians will defend the existence of suffering or evil by pointing to this free will stuff. Doesn't do anything for me at all. Just grant whatever conception of free will you want. Has anyone here ever eaten a bucket of rusty nails? Well, no. Are you able to? If you want to, if you could try eating a bucket of rusty nails. You could drink poison if you want to, but you don't, because you don't want to. So there's no incompatibility between God just structuring people to have minds where they could do things and they never want to. And so then you just have people that have the free will to do evil and they just don't want to. So like, why couldn't God do that?
Theists actually believe that there is an entity like that, namely God, right? God has free will and God doesn't ever desire to do evil. So
right. So why not just build people that way?
So I think the idea would be that, I mean, I've never heard theists say it this way, but I think God desires or considers good to create agents who were not completely specified by him, right? Whose desires were not completely specified by him. So he created them knowing that there was a good chance that some of them would take on desires that he considers evil. But he considers that a better outcome than robots, quote unquote. Right?
Well, here's the question for the Christians here. Is it evil? Do you believe it's evil for a person to create something knowing it will lead to evil?
It depends. I mean, no. Because, I mean, I brought my children into the world knowing that they were going to face evil, but feeling that the good of bringing them into the world would outweigh whatever evil they might experience.
Okay, let's be more specific. If you knew with 100% certainty, and you never ever could be wrong on this one thing, that if you brought your son into the world, that he would kill 20 children at a high school or at an elementary school, and you could choose, you knew this with 100% certainty before you conceived this one particular child, and you decide to do it anyway, would I be okay calling you evil? Because this is the analogy I have for God creating anything in the first place.
Well, I can maybe answer to that. I think God saw how many would actually do evil things, but he saw also the positive side. So he put it on weight and in balance, then he decided, okay, I want to go for it.
I mean, what if that child, what if I also knew that child that killed 20 people also, before he killed those 20 people, he would bear a child that would cure cancer.
Okay. So, I hear you're getting the same argument as potential, but here's the problem. You have this scale of good and bad, but before creation, you have nothing but good. There's no downside by not creating. And if you say there is, then you have to then give up an attribute of God and say he's insufficient in some way. He's needy in some way. He's lacking. Oh, if only someone would worship me.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, right?
But
yeah, that's a fair out.
But Pine Creek, he also saw that he would create more love, and the
more love
benefit,
in what? When you use the word more, you got
between his created beings and himself, and also amongst the
See, then you're saying
beings.
God's not all loving. You've just surrendered one of the attributes of God, because you're saying by God creating, there's more love. So then now God's not all loving.
Wait, but all loving doesn't mean that he is all love is in him, right? I assumed all loving.
No, Christians believe. Some Christians believe that all love comes from God.
Why wouldn't he just create loving outcomes? Why does he have to create evil outcomes? He's God. He could just make this look. You're like, oh, he does these bad things to get to the good things. That just doesn't seem logical to me.
This is why I'm mad at Nathan right now, because I think I have trounced the logical problem.
No, no, I agree with that, right? But I'm saying a good argument would be one that compels, that persuades people, and that's the issue.
If we define good argument by that, then there's no such thing as a good argument.
I just don't think
that's my view.
What did you say, Deepak? I couldn't hear the end of.
I just wanted to make clear. I think Doug's arguments mostly I agree with, right? But I don't think they're logical contradictions, right? So that's why the logical problem of evil is a really strong argument. It's like saying that the current world as we see it, like the Christian view of what we see in the world, is equivalent to believing that there is a round.
No, there is a logical contradiction, and it is this: it's want, non-want.
No,
it is, and then you have to equivocate on the word want in order to get out of it.
Well,
and
it's also maybe it's not. It's not just black and white. He can just decide, depending on the preponderance of what he thinks it's more favorable. It's more favorable.
Favorable. We got the word.
Yes. Compared to the other option.
I know, I understand your argument, but basically then you're saying that the world with God alone is not as good as the world with God plus us.
Yeah.
You have to concede that.
That is true. Yeah.
I think
if you want to concede that, go ahead.
I see no problem with that.
The problem with that,
his argument in terms of perfection, right? In response to you, Deepak, he can say, if a perfect being exists, then imperfection won't ever exist, and then he can just say, well, imperfection exists, and he can cash out, and he defends that first premise by talking about, well, think of a perfect being's reasons, right? It can't improve, so it's not going to have like a desire to want or do anything or anything like that. It wouldn't do. Something that brought about perfection, and it's not limited in terms of power because it's perfectly powerful. So perfection existing can be defended as being logically inconsistent with a perfect being existing.
So I think you have to define what perfect is. I'm not sure I understand exactly what perfect is, right? Before I can see.
I think there's also the aspect that God, he was able to display his love through Christ becoming man and dying on the cross for us. And if he would not have created the world, then he couldn't have displayed his character in the way he has.
So I have a question about that. In the Christian narrative, before Jesus died, did anybody go to hell?
Oh.
I don't believe in hell, so I mean that will have to be
define hell.
Everybody went to hell.
Well, Christ he gave a parable of the rich man and Lazarus, and they went to Hades, which was a place. One went to the bosom of Abraham, and the other went to Hades, which was a place of pain. And I think there is a distinction between this place of pain and the lake of fire described in Revelation. So these seem to be two distinct places. So I think in the Old Testament there was that place of pain, but it is a different place than the lake of fire in Revelation.
Rebecca, you have a video on that, don't you?
I have several videos on hell, and one's with Chris Date, but yeah, so.
But Rebecca, in regards to hell, I want to say something. I've seen several other people which I highly esteem in their opinion, and they have also hold the view that maybe people which end up in the lake of fire, they will not suffer in eternity there. Maybe the lake of fire itself is eternal, but those which will end up there, their pain will be limited until they are annihilated, until they pay for their sins.
Oh yeah, I mean, I believe in the lake of fire. I believe in people being judged and destroyed by fire, but I just don't believe that they are being eternally tormented.
Yeah.
But let's find out where James is going. James is going with his question about hell.
So where I'm going with that is, if before Jesus died within the narrative, nobody went to any given place. If you want to say there's 2 different places, I don't care. 10 different, 100 different, I don't care. If there's even one single horrible outcome or place where somebody was able to go after Jesus died, and some people did go after Jesus died, but which nobody could go to before Jesus died, then that would make the death of Jesus and the resurrection of Jesus the worst thing that's ever happened to humanity, rather than the
Woo! Yes, good point.
Thank you.
But does anybody argue? Do any Christians argue that?
You mean, do any Christians argue that before Jesus died, nobody was in hell?
Yeah, or would go to hell?
Yeah, no, not really. I mean,
I've certainly heard it. I've certainly heard it where people have said that when Jesus went to hell for 3 days, he opened up the gates to heaven and hell. So then that became an option, because before then there was no premise upon which to judge anybody for either place. There wasn't yet a Jesus to die and raise and accept. So there wasn't the foundation for that judgment didn't exist.
Okay, then what did Jesus come to save us from?
Something interesting about that is the early church pretty uniformly understood that even after the cross, that all people still went to Sheol. That was a common belief, which is weird. But so it seems to suggest that they all understood the judgment to be at the end of time, to decide fates.
Yeah, I agree with Jamie.
I don't know any part in the Old Testament which says that there was no Hades and that they didn't end up there.
Or so where did they go? Before Jesus, when people died, where did they go?
To the place of the dead, Hades.
Yeah, Sheol.
Some went, as the parable of Jesus said, to the bosom of Abraham, which maybe is a heavenly place, I don't know. And the others, they went to Hades, which was a place of pain.
And they were judged one way or the other based on what criteria?
That's the problem. I think that's just a parable, and that's not the context is describing the intermediate state, but that's very much split in scholarship. But it seems to me it's problematic to think people are sent to their final fate before this big judgment at the end of time. But I mean, I interpret Hades to be just that they're dead, that they're not conscious until the resurrection. But even it doesn't appear that the early church that was necessarily a popular view, like I have, because they use the same kind of language that's in Scripture, which I take to be kind of metaphoric, kind of typing their ultimate fate. But it seems to me it makes more sense to think they're not judged until the end. I don't know though.
Well, maybe they are not judged, but still in a place of judgment already. But it is just an intermediate stage, maybe. I don't know.
Well, if they're not judged, then they have to all go to the exact same place. They can't go to 2 different places because they're not being judged.
That was one of I've been reading some on this, and I have a video of a presentation on it too on my channel about what the early church believed about death and all that. So from David Berceau, but they seem to want to insist that the main thing they wanted to insist upon is that they went to the same place, which was, I think they like Hades or whatever.
This is actually something which I don't understand, why the Bible is not more clear in regards of these issues.
Because it's written by men?
There you go.
Yeah, I don't think it's clear either, and I wouldn't say that I know where people are right now. I agree. It seems more coherent to say everyone's raised at the end and judged. I just personally don't like that idea because I don't like the idea of being in the grave. But I think you can kind of support it either way. But earlier Pine Creek said, what is Jesus saving us from? And it's sin and death.
Seems like he's done a bad job of it.
I have a question about that, actually.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I've noticed it's about the Bible is just that it's incredibly unclear. It's not explicit. It's not clear. Like, why would God, if he inspired the Bible, choose to write something with a bunch of seemingly irrelevant and superfluous content, like long genealogies, and then just all this ambiguity such that it's thousands and thousands of interpretations? Like, never mind if there is a single correct fact of the matter, objective interpretation of what the Bible means. It doesn't look like it was structured in a way where it would be at all clear what that interpretation even is.
Well, Lance, I feel like this does have a lot to do with our cultural, like the way that we are culturally, because you said the genealogies are superfluous, but for some people throughout history, those would have been incredibly important. And so I feel like, maybe the issue is not with, the Bible's not clear on this. Maybe it's our demand for clarity on certain issues that's the problem. So, I mean, I'm not an expert in, why God didn't do it this way, or, shouldn't he have done it this way? I just accept what he has done, and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, well, that doesn't seem satisfactory to me. It's like, if I was teaching different classes, like I wanted people to understand a topic, and I'm teaching third graders and high school students and college students and graduate students in a doctorate program, the content of what I taught them would be very different. And we don't get that with the Bible. Like, why is the problem on us that God decided on a one size fits all? Why doesn't God write different books? Or God could release updates. Where's the patches? Where are the updates? Why don't we get those?
Well, I mean, the Bible is a collection of 66 books, or maybe more if you're Catholic. So, I mean, it has a variety of ways to speaking to people. It is, it's not all one genre, and it's not all one thing. So I think God has spoken to us, in a variety of methods. And maybe, one book of the Bible is, completely useless to you. Like, I don't like Proverbs. I mean, I just think it's boring and weird. And so,
Proverbs?
like,
how dare you?
But yeah, I have
my
a
favorite
friend.
books.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I have my friend Paul said, Proverbs is the absolute best book in the whole Bible. And I'm like, what? I could live without Proverbs. I never read it.
I'm crying. I'm crying right now.
Really?
No.
Yeah, but like a college textbook, they release these new editions every few years. Often, it kind of seems like it's superficial updates, so they could justify charging people for a new book. But like in principle, God could just inspire consistent, culturally adapted, like appropriate updates. Like, hey, I know, like for instance, here's one that God could have done. God could have inspired somebody to come along and do some prophecy, like some prophetic work, and let us know like what he thinks about embryonic stem cell research or cloning or something. And then you could just add that straight to the Bible. I, your Lord, your God, who, led you out of Egypt, commandeth thee not to engage in embryonic.
He's fine with it. He's fine with it.
Like,
I have also a problem with
God.
I have also that problem between the transition from the Old Testament and the New Testament, which actually was quite a big struggle and confusing even amongst the apostles, because they didn't know, well, what do we have to obey now, and what can we leave as just old from the Old Testament? And that gave a lot of disputes between Peter and Paul. And I mean, even today, what of the Old Testament is not relevant for us anymore? And even that, there are disputes, and some people have an opinion, others have a different opinion, and there is no clear drawing line. And I think this is actually also a problem, and I don't have an understanding why it could not have been done in a more clear fashion.
Because it was written by man.
You have to remember one thing. Israel in 4 BC had no mass communication. Did nobody get that, really? From Jesus Christ Superstar?
Oh, yeah. It
I
took me a
don't know.
moment.
So apparently somebody says they could solve this problem, so
Yeah,
it's
JB?
agree with me, because if I was wrong about something, I would change my mind and therefore believe the right thing. So it proves I'm exactly right about every single thing. So there you go. Just get your answer.
Like for example,
it's supposed to be a joke.
I was recently in a Muslim chat, and they pointed me some things out which I never thought about, like the Apostle Paul. He still kept the Jewish tradition and the laws of the Old Testament, while he was already living in the New Testament, and he made even the Nazareth rite, which was offerings based on the Old Testament. And the Muslims, they asked me about these things. Since I've not studied prior, I didn't have any answer to that. But that entire transition is problematic.
You should convert to Islam, I guess.
I also, in response to Lance, why doesn't God give an update? I feel like the Bible says that in these last days, he has spoken to us by his son, who's the exact representation of who God is. So God has already given us the ultimate revelation of himself by incarnating. And so like, what more can he add? So I feel like to come with
this is what Lance is saying, right? Lance is saying if that's the ultimate revelation and it's lacking in so many respects, well, that's just not what you expect, right? If the hypothesis is that that's an ultimate revelation from a God, and it's lacking
like does the Gospel of John, did Jesus really say, "I am the Lamb of God"?
I thought John said, "Here's the Lamb of God."
Look,
behold the Lamb of
God.
God.
Think about what would happen if you were designing a world and you wanted the people in that world to have free will, but you also wanted them to know what your will was. Like, here's the do's and the don'ts. You could make it a lot clearer. Like 10 commandments is not nearly enough commandments for humans. Like, why don't we have the 10,000 commandments that very clearly, it's like we have like legal, there's like, I don't know, the legal system of any random country you want is just vastly superior to what we get out of the Bible. It's very explicit and clear. Like you could get a glossary. Here's like, where's the glossary in the Bible that says, here's what this word means, and I'm not going to equivocate on it. Instead, you get these translation, like how come God didn't give us a glossary? How come God doesn't lay out explicitly and formally what all the rules are? You can literally get like better and clearer and more explicit lists in like kindergarten classroom rules, like, or like the student code of conduct book for like a random high school. Like,
but
right.
I'm not saying God is like bad at clearly communicating. I'm saying it's like embarrassingly, catastrophically, ridiculously bad to a level that's so absurd. I don't even know how to take any of it seriously. Is like, so that's what God decided to tell us. Didn't tell us about any of this stuff or that stuff or this stuff or that stuff that he could have told us about. Could have resolved all these ethical issues, and we don't have any resolution to any of them.
Well, Lance, there's 612 laws that are part of the Old Covenant, and those 10 commandments are part of those Old Covenant laws. The New Testament it's the New Covenant, and there's actually the command that Jesus gave us is love each other. There's no 10 commandments in the New Covenant. There is the command to love each other. Well, and Jesus said that all the laws, all the commands, everything that you need to know is summed up in that command. So if you're loving God and loving neighbor, then you don't need any other commands because you'll automatically know what to do. And so really? God isn't, well, I mean, of course you have to sometimes seek God in a difficult situation.
Is in vitro fertilization summed up in those commands?
Well, yes. Love God and love neighbor. So
is it morally good or wrong to
then you're trusting? Well, you specifically, God has written his law on your heart. He's given you the power through the Holy Spirit to walk in the right way. So yes, Christians have differences of opinions on that. And, but basically, like, you can't go wrong if you are loving God and loving neighbor. Are we doing that perfectly?
Yes, you can go wrong. Some people kill other people by loving God and loving neighbor because they say, they're not my neighbor. God commanded me to kill them, and I'm going to love God and do it. This is how people in Europe could kill other people who disagreed with them theologically and still read the Beatitudes.
The Jews. How Christians kill the Jews.
It's very clear.
The question is, who is your neighbor? And I think it's not just your neighbor near your house. I think it is all people. It is universal.
I don't think that it was meant that way.
I mean, let's just ask a simple question. Does God think we should love people in a deontological way, where we should act in accordance with certain rules and obligations with respect to how we love people? Or should we be love consequentialists, where we're trying to impartially maximize the amount of love? Like God, it doesn't even clearly distinguish that. I don't know which one. And love everybody doesn't distinguish between whether I should be a love consequentialist or a love deontologist or a love virtue ethicist. It doesn't handle any basic distinctions in how we go about making decisions about right and wrong. Not even basic ones, much less the specific ones. Like, we could get into problems of applied ethics. I don't know how love people applies to the question of in vitro fertilization. It's not at all obvious. And to me, it seems very like passing the buck, or just punting and not really giving an answer, to just say, well, God wrote the law, God wrote the laws on our hearts. Okay, well, what if my heart tells me X, Y, Z and your heart tells you A, B, C? How do we know whose heart has the correct laws written on it? How would we know that? It looks like Christians are foisting the entire epistemic burden onto humanity, and then saying, well, there's some fact of the matter, we don't know what it is, and some people clearly get it right and some people clearly get it wrong. But that's that's not a rebuttal to the point. That is my point. My point is that God has placed massive epistemic hurdles in the way of even having a clue what it would mean to act in a loving way. I don't know what that means. How would I know? Just saying it's written on my heart. Okay, well, my heart says, do this, and your heart says do an opposite thing. Well, now what?
Enter the Roman Catholics.
You can read the letters of Paul, and he is very clear what it entails to love each other. But another question, well, if we have problems with the Bible, does that mean that therefore there is no God?
Well, I want to respond to what Lance just said before we try to go on to another topic. And Lance, but what I'm wondering is, if, let's say, instead of the New Testament, or in addition to the New Testament, God gave 1,000 laws, do you think 1,000 laws would cover every human situation? Do you think 2,000 laws would cover? And I mean, the point I'm making is that even in places where we have thousands of laws, people still argue about the application of the law. So I don't see how God fixes things by making thousands of laws.
I agree. And this is yet a further problem. Not even a bunch of laws would be adequate. What we would need is a bunch of case law where God personally came down, oversaw a bunch of cases, and then we built up a tradition of knowing how God applied the laws in particular cases. So this doesn't work in your favor. It works against you, because it shows that not even a list of commandments, even if it was 100,000 of them, would be adequate. What we would need is a long tradition of God giving us clear answers to particular judicial cases in order for us to even begin to build a sense of what actual justice is. We are left, if the Bible is what we've got, if that's all we've got, we're left pretty much bereft of any clear and unambiguous way of adjudicating moral issues. So if God wants us to act in a morally right or wrong way, he's not really given us the equipment to do so in a way where it's at all clear what the right thing or the wrong thing to do is, if there is a fact of the matter at all.
Let me play devil's advocate. I'll play the Christian. Maybe like the whole point is to allow humans and their free will aspects to evaluate based on these very limited components and come to a conclusion on their own, because God wants us to come to a conclusion on our own. He doesn't want to have to lay out every single law. He wants us to be able to make those evaluations with limited knowledge, and those that make a decision that I guess don't tap into.
And why do we need God?
Then what was that?
Yeah, so I don't think this is going to work.
Why do we need God?
The reason why is fairly simple. If that's the case, then we would be effectively be held morally accountable for ignorance or stupidity. So if you make a sincere mistake, I guess God thinks in vitro fertilization is okay. Here are the reasons why I think God would be okay with that. And then you act on that. And then what happens? You get up to the pearly gates and God's like, turns out you got it wrong. And you're like, yeah, but I had good reasons. Yeah, but you didn't consider this argument from this obscure philosopher you didn't read. You got it wrong. I know you were doing your best and you had good intentions, but good intentions doesn't get you through the pearly gates. Bye-bye, like hell or obliteration, whatever it would be. Then are we morally accountable for being stupid or wrong? That seems weird. It seems like in order to hold me morally accountable for the wrongdoing that I do, I would have to know or believe it to be wrong and be correct about it being wrong and then do it anyway. But like, if I'm simply ignorant, how could I be held morally accountable for that?
Well, but Lance, Jesus has taken care of your moral wrongs. Like, so, I mean, really, this is, you know, you're saying God is holding people morally accountable, but he's provided a way so that you don't have to be morally accountable for your intentional wrongs or your ignorant wrongs.
So I'm not morally accountable if I go and murder people?
Yeah, Jesus took care of it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, he did.
Oh
but
my.
Of course, he doesn't want you to do that. So.
But why ought Lance not do it?
Well, this is another gray zone which I have my problems with, because Christ says that many will come to him and say, I did this and that in your name, and Christ will say, I never met you. I am sure they thought that they were born again Christians, and nonetheless they are condemned by Christ. So if you receive Christ and Lord and Savior, what is the threshold where he will say, okay, you had repentance enough and you changed your conduct good enough in order to accept you and to come to
Potential,
heaven?
you're making Lance's point. You're saying that even the most important point of salvation is up for grabs and what it means.
Yes, I have my problem with that, because I mean, I see, for example, prosperity gospel preachers, and they have done a tremendous harm in the body of Christ. And I have even put in my Facebook timeline a question: prosperity preachers, will they be saved or will they go to hell? It is something which I don't know.
Well, it's good that you say you don't know.
So yes, I agree that there are things which are difficult to. I agree mostly with what Lance has said, but my point is, well, does that lead to justify the no God hypothesis?
Well, no, what Lance was getting at, because we were talking about the Bible, right, and morality and how we know what's moral. So I could grant you, yeah, that doesn't mean a God doesn't exist, but we can say that's more likely that man just wrote the Bible and this God has nothing to do with it.
Right, that's exactly right. So I'm not trying to make some sort of deductive argument that unless God presents explicit and clear and adequate rules and like case law, like a long history of case law, like if God doesn't do that, then God doesn't exist. God didn't do that, therefore God doesn't exist. I'm not trying to make a deductive argument. This is just one piece in a broader abductive argument, like an inference to the best explanation. And this is typically how I approach questions like the existence of God. I don't think that we're ever going to get a knockdown deductive argument for or against the existence of God. So even if you take the sort of logical argument, again, logical problem of evil or something like that, I might be sympathetic to certain ones of the aspects of the premises and that sort of thing. But every one of those premises, no matter how clearly you formulate it, it's going to be tentative and up in the air, and I'm going to assign some sort of probability to it. I don't think deductive arguments are typically the way to go, other than to illustrate that a person might be like themselves committed to certain logically contradictory positions. But that doesn't mean that the person, therefore, whatever they believe is false. People can always accommodate those positions by getting into a state of reflective equilibrium. In other words, just getting consistent by making a concession somewhere. So, for instance, even if you could somehow show to a Christian, to to their satisfaction, God couldn't be omnipotent, or couldn't be omnibenevolent, that wouldn't show Jesus didn't exist. That wouldn't show the resurrection didn't happen. They could just make that concession and say, okay, well, I guess pretty much everything's true. I was just wrong about the omnipotence part. So you can make these concessions. So set aside deductive arguments. The question is, if we're looking at the world, what is the best overall explanation of what the world is like, given the observations that we have? And what you get, and what a lot of atheists and critics and skeptics should be focusing on, is that holistically, if you look at the whole broad picture, there's all these little problems, one after another, that accumulate. And collectively, we take these to build a case where this doesn't look like a world that was built by the Christian God. It looks like a world where a bunch of people mistakenly think that it was, and that's about the best you could say for them.
So are you an agnostic now, or are you an atheist believing that there are no gods?
It's going to depend on how you use those terms. I tend to take the strong atheist position, where I say that I believe that no gods exist. or I think that the best explanation for what the world is like does not invoke the existence of gods. It doesn't appeal to them, and so I think that they're sort of excluded from my model of what the world is like. So I believe they don't exist for the like in the same way like I don't think unicorns exist.
So you need a very strong and good case where you can explain our existence without invoking God, and sincerely, I've never seen any atheist whatsoever to making such case.
Yeah, so part of it is that I don't think it's like, unless I can explain things without God, God wins. I don't find that, like, I don't think God is like this default that you get to fall back on if someone else doesn't give you a satisfactory explanation.
Yeah, I take two approaches. One is eliminative inductions, where I say naturalism doesn't explain basically anything, and since God is the only alternative, then God as the other option is the better explanation. And then I make the abductive argument to the best explanation, where we look into the world and there are several phenomena where we see intelligence had to be involved to instantiate the kind of complexity which we see. So there are basically two approaches here.
Yeah, and I would take issue with both of those. I think that you're probably narrowing the possibilities, and I think it's just not true that our only option is naturalism. And it's probably the case, if we had a discussion about it, that like natural, I think that could be broadened to include a wide range of metaphysical theses that could be on the table. You know, there's stuff like Tegmark, the mathematical universe hypothesis. It could be that, you know, the universe is a mathematical structure and that we should endorse some type of like Pythagoreanism or something like that. I don't think that would require us to posit the existence of a god or gods in the classical Christian sense. And it might not entail the sorts of assumptions that are often attributed to atheists. Like, I don't think that atheists have to take on board a type of like 18th century, really goofy billiard ball version of materialism, which is where it looks like a lot of Christian apologetics is, where, you know, the atheist is penned with these kind of naive materialist positions that I don't think that atheists can or even should endorse if they want to have an accurate picture of what the world is like. So that would be one issue. And then as far as the design stuff, I don't find the arguments there persuasive. Like, I think that if someone's going to say that things had to be designed, they would need good arguments for that. I don't think the arguments are very good. So I don't think I need to I could just look at life on Earth and go, I have no clue how this got here. But I don't think if I have no idea that you get to say, well, therefore the best explanation is God did it. I think that the probability, so often people frame the issue like this: unless you can give me a single specific, concrete, substantive explanation that's an alternative to God did it, that is independently more probable than God doing it, God did it is the most likely explanation. But in many cases, what you could do is just say, look, there's an undifferentiated, unspecified range of possibilities. I don't even know the content of them, and they're all more probable than the specific proposal that you presented. And I just endorse whatever that is, a big question mark. Very concrete example, and then that's the last I'll say because I'm saying a lot of stuff. You know, we come across a dead body, we say, uh-oh, what happened? It looks like this person was murdered. Let's say there's an axe in their head. If someone showed up and said, well, I think Bigfoot did the murder, like Bigfoot got caught, that person had a camera, so Bigfoot killed them and stole the camera so that Bigfoot wouldn't get exposed as real. Unless you have a better explanation, I get to say that that's true. That's ridiculous. You could just say, I have no idea. So do you think that person did or that person? And if I can't tell you the precise conditions under how and why this person was murdered and by who and when, and unless I give all the details, you get to say Bigfoot did it. That's not how that works. I could just say, no idea. That's not very likely. That's less likely than any number of arbitrarily long list of possibilities that could bring up.
I had a vision Bigfoot did it.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you.
I don't think I need to come up with an alternative. I don't see any positive reason to think God did it is particularly probable in the first place.
Well, I agree.
We've had this conversation at Angelo. We've had this conversation, haven't we? And you just say, yeah, okay, I can't tell you how God did it. I can't tell you what the material cause of anything is. I can't actually give you any details whatsoever about my explanation, but I just still randomly say that it is a good explanation of the thing it's supposed to explain.
No, Lance, I agree with you that there are many different positions. Of course, it's not black and white. I mean, there are deists, there are pantheists, panentheists, there are idealists, and there are many different propositions and views here. I fully agree with you on that. But what I say is that basically we can really categorize in two buckets. In one, there is a God which is intelligent, eternal, or plural gods, and in the other there is not. And it boils down to the categorization. The God bucket, there is intelligence, and in the no God bucket, there is no intelligence. And this is a very good criteria to look into the world to distinguish what are the fingerprints and signatures of intelligent actions. And if we see them in nature, then it is a good indication.
Angelo, how did God create the universe?
Well, that is a second question, Nathan.
How did God create the universe? Okay, how did God design us? How did he do it?
Well, Nate, let me just say this
how did God create our DNA?
Before I answer you. I think that prior to any subsequent question, this is the big distinction that we can make, and it is a good way to actually construct.
Can there be intelligence without God, Otangelo?
I think not, Pine Creek.
Okay, so we see intelligence, therefore God, right? We're done.
Well, I mean, if you put intelligence like the intelligent design movement, they don't put who or what that intelligence is. And there are even atheists which are intelligent design proponents, like Berlinski.
But I'm an atheist, and I admit that a God could exist, and your explanation could be right. Can you admit that we could have intelligence and talking here today without a God?
I think, Pine Creek, that this is a very
yes, no.
I will say no, absolutely no. But guys, I want to try to wrap up the stream. So I want to give people an opportunity to share final points on this topic or on numbers or whatever. And I want to start with James because he has a bunch of notes in the chat. So James, if you want to say what you're all, what you wanted to say based on these notes.
I will try to cliff note this really quick.
Okay.
Christine Hayes from Yale University has a great lecture that's on YouTube where she explains how the biblical Hebrews solved the problem to their own satisfaction, not necessarily to ours, for how God needs to give updates. And basically, if you watch the lecture, the way the arrangement the biblical Hebrews had with their God was that they would update him. They would let him know what their changing needs were, and then he would in turn grow, evolve, change, adapt, however you want to put it, and he would start speaking more consistent with the needs of the Hebrew people at that time. And it's, of course, not something that fits within the Christian narrative, but it is certainly the way that the Hebrews, even though most people don't realize that, it's yes, exactly. There you go. There's that. I think that is actually one of the lectures that I'm talking about. That's how they resolved it. So that's one of the points I wanted to make. The next point was about Sam Harris, where he talks about one of the ways in which there is a direct conflict often between loving God and loving humans. You have to choose. And one of those examples was St. Augustine argued that Aquinas didn't go far enough in his theory. Aquinas is like, yeah, we need to hunt down heretics and kill them. Augustine was like, I don't know, we should probably torture them into confession and repentance first to give them the best possible chance to get to heaven. And the reason that both of them thought that you needed to be pretty extreme in handling heretics was because, as Sam Harris points out, if somebody living next door to you can say or do or be anything that might mislead your children or mislead your family, even in the kindest of possible ways, away from the truth of God and into a worldly disposition or belief system or lifestyle or anything else, then that person next door becomes even greater danger than a child molester, because they could cost your children, your family, your community, their eternal salvation. And so the situation there was, we're gonna have to choose. We either be loving toward our neighbors in a simple, basic, common sense, be nice to people kind of way, or we have to show the ultimate love toward God and hunt down our neighbors, torture them, and kill them, because then that's the most loving thing to do, because we're talking about mathematics, numbers, fates. How do you save the most people from the worst possible conclusion? And we don't have time to get into that whole discussion, but that's one of the things I wanted to talk about earlier. Accepting Jesus isn't as specific as it sounds. You can say, accept Jesus, but a Jehovah's Witness accepts Jesus. A Mormon accepts Jesus. A Catholic accepts Jesus. So for people to go around saying, all you have to do, accept Jesus Christ, your personal Lord and Savior, and you've hedged your bets, you've covered it, you're covered, it means something different to them. He's, God has different character attributes. He has a different plan. He has different terms and conditions. Jesus is defined in a completely different way as well. So it's not a self-explanatory thing. It's not just as simple as accept Jesus. You have to be so specific that you basically aligned yourself with a particular sect's interpretations from a very contradictory and vague set of texts that can mean almost anything when you read them. So it's really, really, really not helpful. And the way that I've noticed that most Christians resolve that problem is egocentrism. They each assume that they are the moral center of the universe when it comes to interpreting or understanding God. So if you've accepted a version of Jesus that's different than the one that they've accepted, well, now there's something wrong with you. You have in your heart somehow rejected the true Jesus, and you know it on some level, which is, of course, ridiculous, because even though I completely disagree with JWs and Catholics and all these other organizations, most of them are earnest people. They obsess about trying to figure out a way to humble themselves before the Creator, God, who they assume wrote the Bible, and to please him no matter what it takes. They would do anything. They would suffer any fate. They would make any sacrifice. They stress over it, and yet they're wrong. And so this idea that a lot of Christians have that, the answer to figuring out what God really wants is based on being a good enough person that you come to my same conclusions. If you're good enough, if you're humble enough, if you're loving enough, if you're whatever, you'll realize that this interpretation of Jesus and this interpretation of God and Bibles is the correct one. Well, all the different Christians think that. It's a very egocentric thing. It's not an objectively reasonable thing. And the problem I have with it is that it divides the world. We get all these people who are sitting in harsh judgments of so many other people, and they're nice to their face, but they go to church on Sunday and talk about how those people are going to hell. So for me, that's a big problem. So
but if people left, James, if people left religion tomorrow, the world would still be divided.
Sure, it would.
But we'll just find other things to divide us.
Sure. So, but would we divide as much? Would we divide as aggressively? When an atheist sits in judgment over a Christian for being silly or being ill-informed or being illogical, that's just it. They just think, I kind of wish you would be nicer. I kind of wish you would quit saying bad things about LGBT people, because it would be nice if, I don't know, less 12-year-olds killed themselves because of being bullied by the Bible. They don't follow that up with, and I think you deserve to go to hell forever. I've never met an atheist that could even hold a candle to the amount of harsh judgment that Christians have against other Christians, because the stakes are higher in their narrative. So the thing that they think deserves to happen to you for being wrong is way more extreme than what atheists think you deserve to happen for being wrong.
Yeah, true.
So I have other points, but I don't want to rant for the next half hour, so I'm just going to leave it at those.
Okay, can I respond to that really quick?
Please
Because
do.
James, I want to just say I agree with your point. I think that is a huge error that Christians are making by making faith in Christ about having the right kind of knowledge about him. So when I think about Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, I think they have some wrong information about God, just like I do. I have wrong information about God. I'm sure of it. I don't know what that is, or I would correct it. But I think that they have you can have a lot of wrong information about Jesus, but still be saved by Jesus if that is your desire. And I even go as far to say I believe many Muslims are saved. So I don't think that the primary thing that God is judging people on is knowledge. I think that, Christ's salvation is enough for, our moral failures and our failures in obtaining the right knowledge. So I agree with you that I think it's horrible that, Christians kind of divide themselves and even will say of other people, well, they don't believe in the right Jesus and therefore they can't be saved and they're going to hell. I think that's a major error, and I think it's driven a lot of people away from God.
But what if your knowledge about Jesus is wrong? What if I think Jesus is evil? Is that a knowledge issue?
Well, it might just be a knowledge issue. It might be a heart issue. So I think there are lots of atheists who are actually aligned with Jesus Christ, and a lot more than they think they are, because they've been misinformed about who he is. Maybe they think he's evil because they've heard maybe they watched too much Pine Creek and they thought Jesus was evil. And so,
but when you said it's not about knowledge, I'm pushing back against that, because you said misinformed of who Jesus is. Who is Jesus? Like, that's a knowledge issue.
Well, would you agree that there is a truth that exists about who Jesus is somewhere in the world? Like it exists, whether it's okay. So then that's all I'm talking about. Like there is a real Jesus. Right?
What if Jesus was a schmuck and everything written in the Gospels is mostly wrong about him?
Okay, then, if that's true, then I'm totally wrong, and we're all going to die and be buried, and that's going to be the end of it.
Amen.
So,
well, Rebecca, you said that Muslims can be saved even if they reject Christ.
Well, are they really rejecting Christ though? Like, because many of them have never heard the gospel, but they are living lives devoted to God.
Rebecca, I conditionally accept Christ.
What's that?
I'd like to conditionally accept Christ. If Christ is real, I accept him.
Hallelujah! Hallelujah! Hallelujah!
Why are you celebrating, Rebecca? What has changed about Deepak? Why are you celebrating?
Yeah.
Well, he's provisionally accepting Christ.
Yeah, but why is that something to celebrate?
Well, I think that's a good step, right?
Good step to what?
I believe God will honor that.
Oh, it's a good step.
You guys can all get provisionally saved today.
Okay, I'm provisionally saved today too. Now what?
Really?
How come you're not celebrating for me? You did it for Deepak.
Well, because I'm not sure you're sincere.
Oh my goodness.
So, but okay, cool. Okay, who wants to share next, please?
I would like to go next because I'd like to ask a question that Lance may choose to answer, or anyone who goes after me can answer. I think there's like a Steelman version of what Otangelo is saying, right? That I think may conceivably work, right? Which is like, I don't think it leads you to like God or anything, but it might lead you to some notion of purpose or intention or telos, right? Like, so you could, I think it's possible to say that, the universe is broadly the possible, reality is either like has some intentionality behind it or it doesn't. And the way you define it more precisely is kind of like, maybe we don't have like the tools for it yet, but just like more than 100 years ago, before Claude Shannon came up with information theory, right? Information was just like this loose kind of informal concept, and he made it like precise, right? The notion of what information is, to the point where you can actually apply it to the universe and physics and stuff in general. So maybe one day we'll do the same for the concept of intentionality, whether if something is designed or not. And maybe you would then be able to apply it to the universe in some evidential way and say that, look, the evidence clearly indicates that the universe as a whole is a system that is designed. I don't know if that means that there's a person who designed it or some other sense of like intentionality, but maybe that's possible. That's all. Also, everybody should watch Jesus Christ Superstar if they haven't already.
It's Memorial Day, so I'd like to say I want to give thanks to all those Christian military people who shot their neighbors so we could live free.
Well, amen to that. Freedom stuff.
Okay, so who else wants to say something?
I'll go next. Fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be brief. But I like to appreciate Rebecca having everybody on. The one thing I was going to say is the thread that I see amongst all these conversations, which I know gets kind of an old topic to bring up, is this issue of the God of the gaps aspect of saying that we can't explain something, therefore it must be God. Like, even though Otangelo is saying, look, you can't explain these things, therefore there must be some intelligent designer, and maybe he's not calling that God. Okay. But just because we say that we don't have all the understandings for a particular issue, like abiogenesis or whatever, the complexity of life, isn't a reason to say that you can just say, it's this disembodied mind or it's this intelligent designer. It could be a variety of mechanisms that we're just not aware of yet. But we do have reason to believe that unguided processes can construct the world around us. We have evidence of that. Is it 100% conclusive evidence? No, it's not. But we have good evidence across many different disciplines that support those hypotheses. So when we look at these two particular areas of having unguided processes that fit with all these other facets that we know about science and about our world, as compared to saying, we're just going to say it was designed by a thing or a disembodied mind or whatever, it doesn't. The evidence is far in the favor of the other side. And again, I'm not saying that it's not possible. I guess it's possible, but I just think it's highly, highly unlikely, and the evidence doesn't support that. So,
Jason, I have responded to that 100 times, and you keep peddling the same argument, which basically all atheists do, by claiming we are making God of the gaps arguments. And that's simply not true. What we are saying is, based on the evidence, based on what we see in nature, and intelligence as a causal mechanism is the most case adequate and most plausible explanation. That's not the God of the gaps argument. And you are saying, well, unguided evidence explain it. Well, no, they don't. We don't have evidence of this. You are just blindly making things up and saying this true. No, it's not true.
Well,
we don't have any.
Well, let him have the last word today, Otangelo, because we've already, like you said, we've already gone back and forth on this so many times. So
that was all I was going to say, Rebecca. I can just stop on that. I mean, I know, and I'll just say, Otangelo, I'm happy anytime to revive this debate and discussion on this topic. So,
well, Jason, I am sorry, but you need to talk to PhD scientists.
I have a PhD.
So you need to talk to people with the same qualifications that you have, because I am a layman. I am not keeping up with your knowledge. So whatever I say, you just say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about because you don't have a degree.
Man, if you can't,
I'm really not interested to hear that again.
That's fine. I understand. I wouldn't want to debate me either. That's fine.
Okay. Anybody else have final words? We heard from, who did we not hear from? We didn't hear from Nathan or from...
Yeah, Nathan's been really quiet.
Yeah.
I'll say I agree with Lance, basically, that if there is to be a way forward between thinking people on both sides, then it's by comparing the best theories that embed the claim that God does not exist and the claim that God does exist holistically. Trading individual arguments won't do. And then in that kind of framework, I think that we are going to have to there's going to have to be some commonality between the frameworks in order for them to even communicate with each other. So certain things like what an explanation of anything consists in, and simply stipulating that a good explanation is noun, right? I can say this fork, right, is a good explanation of DNA because simply nothing else explains it. I can say that, but if I can't tell you anything about how this fork did it, then I don't have an explanation whatsoever. I just have a stipulation. And it doesn't matter how much I insist that this fork did it. It doesn't matter how dogmatic I am. It doesn't matter how pig-headed I am and unreasonable to the reasons of others. It doesn't make it a good explanation of the thing I'm trying to explain.
Cool. Okay, I think we didn't hear from Lance. Did you want to say something, James? You're unmuted.
From me?
Lance? Oh, well...
I already talked a lot.
All right. So that was your final thoughts. Okay, then I think everybody got to say final thoughts. So thanks everybody for being here. It was fun, and hope you guys have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.